stood at the edge of the water, the current swirling like angry snakes. Our protagonist, Hua Mujin, declared that this was their next training program. They were going to cross, no matter how dangerous it looked. One of the men looked absolutely terrified, telling Mujin that it was impossible. He said the current was too fast, and people were known to die trying to cross, even without carrying anything. With a weight attached to his back, Hua Mujin ignored the fear and said he was going ahead. Another person decided to follow Hua Mujin, yelling that they were going too, but then they screamed as they jumped into the raging water. Someone else shouted that they were screwed, but they had to run. It was a do-or-die situation, and they were all in it together. Even a little boy didn't back down and jumped into the water. While swimming, Mujin says that if anyone fell, they would die, so they should move their arms and legs non-stop. The little boy face was contorted with effort as he kicked and paddled, trying to stay afloat. The water crashed around him, threatening to pull him under. The struggler pushed forward, his arms aching and his lungs burning. He could do it, he told himself. Even something like this. But the current was too strong for the boy, and he couldn't keep the pace. The training was certainly crazy, but to understand how they got here, we need to go back a few decades. The battlefield was a graveyard of shattered stone and fallen warriors. Zhang Cheon stood in the center, the only one left standing. The air was thick with the smell of blood and the dust of broken dreams. He slowly drew his sword, the steel whispering as it left its sheath. A red aura began to swirl around him, crackling with barely contained power. Shaolin Abbot Hyun Jinchun, Mount Hua sect leader Zhang Guang, and Namgung clan patriarch Namgung Huang all knew now that the divine demon was exhausted. They had to end him right then and there. Zhang Qian stared ahead, his eyes burning with a cold intensity. He knew he was tired, but he wasn't finished yet. He thought to himself that only they remained. The Shaolin Abbot, Mount Hua sect leader, and Namgung clan patriarch all raised their weapons, their faces grim. Hyunjin Cheon chanted, telling them to prepare themselves. The battle had pushed them both to their limits. Zhang Qian's face was a mask of exhaustion, but his eyes still burned with that cold fire. Hyun Jinchun was equally strained, every muscle in his face tight with effort. The two warriors collided, their movements a blur of speed and power. The Shaolin Abbot launched a strike, aiming to end the fight with a single, decisive blow. The force of the impact shook the ground. The Shaolin Abbot, Hyunjin Cheon, looked absolutely furious as he unleashed his attack. He roared that Zhang Cheon was an accursed divine demon. Hyunjin Cheon channeled all of his energy into a single, devastating strike. He yelled the name of the technique, Heavenly Buddha Palm Strike. Zhang Cheon managed to raise his sword just in time, blocking the abbot's attack. The force of the blow still sent tremors through his body. Zhang Cheon was caught off guard by the sudden surge of power from Hyunjin Cheon. What? He thought, barely able to react to the incoming strike. Hyunjin Cheon, with a scream of fury, declared that he was going to kill Zhang Cheon right then and there. He didn't hold back, putting everything he had into the attack. Zhang Cheon, struggling to keep his ground, yelled for everyone to join the fight. He insisted that now was the time to strike. The air crackled with energy as the fighters prepared their next moves. The tension was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. Two powerful techniques were unleashed at once: Plum Blossom, Flash Strike, and Thunder Rolling Strike. The impact was going to be devastating. The attacker screamed that the target was going to die. He put everything he had into the slash, hoping to end it all. The attack hit hard, and the victim screamed in pain. Blood splattered as he felt the energy tear through him. The attacker gathered more energy, preparing another strike. He wasn't going to let up. The attacker brought his hands together, ready to strike. He said that the victim would be reborn in paradise. The victim looked up, completely shocked. He couldn't believe what was happening. Dark red energy started swirling around the figure. It felt like something terrible was about to happen. The two figures clashed, their swords meeting in a storm of sparks and energy. The force of the impact sent shockwaves through the air. The head fell to the ground with a thud. The system announced that Hyunjin Chun was dead. The two men looked up, their faces pale with shock. One of them stammered, calling the attacker a monster. The attacker unleashed another wave of energy. Someone shouted to fall back, sensing they were completely outmatched. The blade pierced through him, and he coughed up blood. He looked absolutely furious. The man's face was twisted in rage. He was the divine demon, Zhang Qian. To cut down the man who had single-handedly drenched the Central Plains in blood, all the martial masters of the 9 great sects gathered. They all knew what was coming, but even then, no one could be sure of victory. The tension was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. Facing the one whose martial strength was deemed the greatest under heaven, their alliance was driven to the brink of collapse. The force of their blows shook the very earth. The swords met with a flash of light. The force of the impact making both warriors stumble back. The one in red shouted, asking if the old man had prepared his gravesite. The old man laughed, not backing down an inch. He said of course he was ready, and that the grave was for the other guy. The man in red unleashed his attack, the plum blossom rain. Countless petals swirled around him, each one as deadly as a blade. The air crackled with energy as the plum blossom rain intensified, the blossoms glowing with a faint light. It was a beautiful yet deadly sight. Blood dripped from the old man's sword, but he was still standing. He muttered that it wasn't over yet. Far above, people were relaxing under the trees, enjoying the cherry blossoms. But Zhang Qian's mind was only on survival. He thought that he couldn't die just yet, no matter what. Suddenly, the words demonic spirit sword art 5th form appeared, glowing with dark power. It was a technique that could change everything. Zhang Qian unleashed the black dragon execution, the energy swirling around him like a storm. He was betting everything on this one move. The attack landed, and Zhang Guang was sent flying back with a scream. Then the system announced that Zhang Guang was dead. Zhang Qian stood there, staring at the scene. He was confused, unsure of what to do next. Suddenly, the words Infinite Emperor Sword Art glowed brightly. New power was flowing through him. Namgung Huang screamed that he was a damn rat from the Namgung clan. He added that it hurt like hell, but the little brother hugged Zhang Qian tightly, burying his face in his chest. He was scared. Namgung Huang shouted in disbelief, saying that it tickled. He then asked what was going on. Zhang Qian's sword was pointed down, dripping with blood. The fight was far from over. The fighters were lost in a storm of swirling red and black energy, moving so fast it was hard to tell who was who. It was a chaotic mess of power and desperation. Namgung Huang was covered in blood, his face a mask of pain and fury. He looked absolutely furious, like he was ready to keep fighting no matter what. Namgung Huang was sent flying backwards, crashing to the ground. He coughed, clearly in pain from the blow. Namgung Huang, lying on the ground, screamed, calling Zhang Qian a filthy demonic bastard. His voice was full of hate. Zhang Qian stood over Namgung Huang, his shadow falling over the defeated man. The fight was over, and Zhang Qian had won. Bolts of pure energy rained down, each strike carrying enough power to tear apart mountains. The air crackled with electricity. Zhang Qian was completely consumed by rage, his face twisted in a mask of pure fury. He was going to end this right here. Zhang Qian screamed for Namgung Huang to just die already. He was throwing everything he had into this last attack. Zhang Qian roared that Namgung Huang's stubborn life was ending right there. He looked absolutely determined to finish it. It was all getting clearer to Namgung Huang. He was seeing a vision of a family holding lanterns, their faces full of love. Yes, Zhang Qian declared that he was going to finish it, putting everything he had into this last strike. But then he stammered, clearly confused by something. Zhang Qian shouted that he said he was going to finish it, putting his whole body into the sword. He was going to cut through this cursed entanglement. Right then and there, the blades clashed, sending sparks flying everywhere. The force of the impact shook the ground beneath them. Zhang Qian grunted, his face contorted in pain. He was clearly taking serious damage. Zhang Qian coughed, blood splattering on the ground. He was barely standing, but he refused to fall. Blood splattered everywhere as the force of the attack ripped through the air. The impact was brutal, leaving a trail of crimson in its wake. The figure in red was sent flying backward, completely overwhelmed by the force of the blow. They were struggling to regain their balance, but it was clear they were in serious trouble. His face was contorted in pain as he fell through the air, completely defeated. He couldn't believe this was happening. The attacker stammered, clearly in shock. He couldn't understand how Zhang Qian was still standing after he pierced his heart. The attacker wondered if Zhang Qian had truly surpassed the limits of what a human could do. The attacker was lost for words, unable to comprehend what was happening. He was starting to realize that he was completely outmatched. The words appeared as if carved in stone. The divine demon, Namgung Huang, was dead. The announcement hung in the air like a curse. The sky was painted with streaks of red, like blood spilled across the heavens. The world itself seemed to be mourning. Zhang Qian's scarred face loomed, a grim reminder of past battles. The 9 great sects, their names echoed in his mind. Below the sun, a field of corpses stretched out, a testament to total annihilation. It was a graveyard of ambition. Blood dripped from the blade, each drop a memory of violence. Manhwa, the name hung in the air, heavy with the weight of the past. The man stood there, blood staining his clothes, wondering if what he had done was good enough. So, Young, was this good enough? Back at the clan, the crowd was furious. They shouted at the man, saying he was an arrogant bastard and asking how he dared to act up. A hand reached out, as if trying to grasp something just out of reach. It was a moment frozen in time. The man was getting beat up, and he could only manage to say that his opponent was pretty good at fighting. He coughed up blood, wondering if this was his life flashing before his eyes. It had been a while since he had seen his master's young face. He realized that his time in the Murim had begun here. Hua Mujin sat there, the rain soaking through his clothes as he remembered his past. It all started with brawls for survival, wandering without a home, relying only on a single sword. He had no choice. To live another day, Hua Mujin had to kill someone. Each strike was a fight for his own survival. Endless, meaningless slaughter. Hua Mujin wondered if such a life could even have meaning. He was surrounded by the bodies of those he had killed, each one a reminder of his past. Is human life truly this fleeting? Hua Mujin stared at the fallen around him. They were gone in an instant, just like that. A woman's voice cut through his thoughts. The speaker smiled gently, saying that she understood that feeling. It was a strange thing to say. The speaker continued, explaining that she also had to clash daily in the market, arguing with people. In this world, she said, you had to treat everyone as an enemy if you wanted to survive long. And soothing her younger siblings' endless complaints about food was exhausting. But in those moments, the speaker went on. They were the most precious. She explained that when she lost her parents and collapsed, they gave meaning to her life again. She held them close. The woman looked at Hua Mujin and asked if he could also find a meaning for his life. She smiled gently, hoping he would understand. Hua Mujin thought back to his past life, the endless battles and bloodshed. He wanted to live with them all, he realized. For someone like him, who only knew how to kill, she gave him a reason to live. The sword he raised again for vengeance. A life drifting by without roots. Hua Mujin wondered where the meaning of his life had been. It was all just death and destruction. Above, a woman smiled, clearly up to no good. Below, Hua Mujin stared at the rising sun, his face unreadable. Hua Mujin looked down, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. It was already here all along, he realized, remembering the faces of his family. Hua Mujin thought about the battered path he walked alone for years. Though his sword dulled and his body bore countless wounds, he had given everything he had just so he could fulfill this revenge. And then, gazing at the faintly rising sun, Hua Mujin lowered the sword in his hand. He finally understood. The system announced, "Here lies the divine demon, Zhang Qian." It was over. The defender of the clan was furious. He demanded to know what kind of nonsense this was, asking if they really thought he would sell out his clan's martial arts legacy for a few coins. Hua Mujin's eyes narrowed, trying to understand what was going on. He muttered that this was all a racket, wondering if he was actually in hell. The announcer declared that since Hua Mujin's elder brother had suffered an unfortunate accident and couldn't continue the martial arts lineage, she would have her own son inherit the Flame Hua clan's secret martial arts. Hua Mujin was even more confused. He stammered, asking what was going on and if this wasn't hell. Little sister looked on, worried. Little brother shouted, denying everything. He insisted that his elder brother was still alive and well, questioning how the clan's martial arts could be given to outsiders. Little sister was furious. She yelled that they weren't even direct blood, insisting that their grandfather's martial arts had to stay within the Flame Hua clan, no matter what. Hua Mujin looked up, completely lost. He muttered, wondering who the hell these people were and what they wanted. Hua Mujin's lips curled into a sinister smile. He seemed to be enjoying the chaos, like he knew something the others didn't. Hua Mujin announced that this wouldn't end like this. He proposed a deal to the crowd, his voice echoing through the room. Hua Mujin continued, saying that he'd heard those two were so poor they couldn't even afford food, so he would wager money. Hua Mujin declared that he would wager his clan's entire martial arts legacy. He was offering everything, right there. He looked at them, waiting for an answer. Hua Mujin asked what they said, the silence hanging heavy in the air. Little sister looked absolutely furious. She yelled, asking if he thought she was dumb enough to fall for such an obvious trick, calling it nonsense. Suddenly, the kid spoke up, looking confused. He asked who the hell Hua Mujin even was. His eyes narrowed, his face hardening. Zhang Qian declared that he was the divine demon. An stood tall and declared that he was none other than Zhang Qian, known to the world as the divine demon. The other figure looked at him, asking what he was talking about. Chang Dobo scoffed, saying that wasn't even funny. He asked why Zhang Qian didn't just call himself the king of the underworld instead, clearly not believing a word. The little brother and little sister both looked disgusted by the whole thing. The little brother wondered why this was happening now, of all times. The woman looked down at them all. She said that Zhang Qian's madness must be getting worse every day. quietly. Bucho Yeon clicked her tongue, saying that with the eldest son of the clan in this state, the fate of the Flame Hua clan was already sealed. She said this out of blood ties and sentiment, so he should take it kindly, and that it wasn't bad advice for her either. Zhang Cheon's eyes narrowed, and he declared that there was no need to say more. He looked absolutely sure of himself. Zhang Cheon announced that he would take their silence as acceptance of the duel, so it was to be known as such. He declared that the duel would be held at the Byong Pavilion on the 5th day of the 2nd month. Zhang Cheon stared intently, saying it was a promise made from one martial artist to another. He warned that if the duel agreement was broken, there would be consequences. Zhang Cheon looked down at them all, asking if they knew the consequences. Right, divine demon Zhang Cheon? His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken threats. The little brother and little sister watched, stunned. The little brother couldn't believe that they were deciding it between themselves. The little brother stuttered, asking what Hua Mujin was going to do. He pointed out that Hua Mujin had never even swung a sword properly before, his voice laced with worry. Hua Mujin looked down at the children, asking if they were talking about him. He seemed unfazed by their lack of faith in his abilities. Hua Mujin was surrounded by a sudden burst of inner energy, a fierce look on his face. He found their doubts amusing, even hilarious, considering his beginner's level, with just one burst of inner energy, or so he thought. Hua Mujin's eyes widened in shock, his confident smirk fading. He realized something was terribly wrong. Hua Mujin looked up, his voice laced with panic as he asked what was happening. He couldn't feel even an ounce of inner energy within him. It was all gone. Hua Mujin looked up, clearly pissed. He wondered what was wrong with this body. It was so frail and weak. He doubted it could even hold a sword. The little sister looked up at Hua Mujin, begging him to stop. She didn't understand what was happening. The little brother pleaded with Hua Mujin to come to his senses. He reminded Hua Mujin that even in his madness, he was still their brother. He couldn't believe Hua Mujin would just sit there and take it. The little brother was furious. He demanded to know how anyone dared call their brother a fool. The little sister tried to apologize, but he wouldn't let her. The little sister, tears streaming down her face, suddenly screamed. She blamed Hua Mujin for the death of their mother and father. The little sister turned and ran, clearly scared. She didn't even look back as she took off. The man told the little sister that he understood. He added that she often lost herself like this, and he asked for everyone's understanding. The man then announced that he would take his leave. He turned and walked away. Hua Mujin thought to himself that even the children treated him like a madman now. He found this absurd, truly so. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the courtyard. The sky was turning orange, but Hua Mujin felt nothing but cold inside. Hua Mujin stood in front of the stone monument, his mind racing. He remembered something, and he started to speak. Hua Mujin recalled that he clearly cut through the Namgung clan patriarch's head. He still felt the sensation of his heart being pierced, making it hard to breathe. He even fulfilled vengeance for Yeonhwa and her siblings. Hua Mujin thought he should have closed his eyes peacefully, but now he was inside this body. Hua Mujin looked around, trying to understand. How the hell did this happen? He stared at the children, wondering who they were and why they looked like Sok and Young. Hua Mujin was getting annoyed. What nonsense was this? A man came running up to Hua Mujin, calling out to him. Hua Mujin was confused, not knowing who the man was. The man scolded Hua Mujin, asking if he had any idea how worried he had been, especially with his frail body. Hua Mujin just stared back, wondering who this person was. Ma Sok sighed, figuring Hua Mujin was having another bout of madness. He introduced himself as Ma Sok, a vassal of the Flame Hua clan, ready to explain everything again. Ma Sok explained that Hua Mujin was once incredibly talented and reputable, so much so that countless Orthodox sects wanted him as a disciple. He reminded Hua Mujin that he became the clan's leader at 23, and that this was the 6,205th time he had to explain this. Hua Mujin asked if that was really so. Then why was his energy core like this now? He wondered why everyone treated him like he was a lunatic, clearly frustrated by the situation. Hua Mujin started to explain about something that happened a long time ago. He seemed to be thinking back to a specific event. Years ago, it turns out, there was a fight. The memory showed two small figures in the distance, battling without using any inner energy. The memory zoomed in, showing Hua Mujin and Chiang Dobo as kids. Hua Mujin only 6 years old, challenged the 9-year-old Chang Dobo to a fair duel. It was a fight that was agreed upon, fair and square, without inner energy. I don't know who asked for the duel first, but it was intense. The thing is, while the elders of both families were away, the kids were going at it. The force of the strike was insane. The two of them fought each other, throwing punches. Young Hua Mujin ended up falling backwards. The fight between the kids was really intense. Their fists were flying, clashing together with a loud crack. Chang Dobo was blocking every strike. He was quick and precise. Chang Dobo told Hua Mujin that he really was the promising genius, admired by the orthodox sects, showing honest, unarmed skills. He then asked what Hua Mujin was saying all of a sudden. Hua Mujin looked up at Chang Dobo, calling him a fool. He looked absolutely furious. A fist, crackling with blue energy, was coming right at him. It was like a lightning bolt ready to strike. The impact sent him flying through the air. He crashed through the trees. The wind knocked out of him. Feet landed hard on the ground, digging into the dirt. The force of the landing echoed through the area. Hua Mujin coughed, blood dripping from his mouth. He asked, confused, why Chang Dobo had used the 7 wounds fist strike when they were supposed to fight without inner energy. Chang Dobo stumbled backwards, his expression a mix of pain and regret. He asked Hua Mujin if he still considered him a friend, even after all this. Hua Mujin was a mess, bloodied and bruised. Chang Dobo's voice echoed in his mind, explaining that the 7 wounds fist strike passed down by the Kongdong sect was no joke. Even if you only get hit once, Chang Dobo went on, saying he'd recently tested it out on a senior brother who was getting cocky. Apparently, 1 strike was enough to leave him bedridden. Chang Dobo's fist crackled with that same blue energy, ready to strike again. He sneered, wondering how Hua Mujin would handle another hit. Hua Mujin thought to himself that this was the reason they called him insane. If they thought his condition was just an after effect of the 7 wounds fist strike, it made sense. Hua Mujin was starting to get pissed. He thought it was insane that Ithahusin would waste his clan's legacy to cripple him into a lunatic with no energy core and then shamelessly demand a duel. That was too much. Hua Mujin wondered how the clan had handled that scumbag back then, for things to end up in such a mess. Turns out, it was the decision of the former clan patriarch. Hua Mujin asked if he was talking about his father. Chang Dobo confirmed that he was. Chang Dobo was his young cousin, but he was also the son of the Changhua merchant group, ranked among the top 10 within the Central Plains. So all he got was a stern scolding, and that was the end of it. Hua Mujin couldn't believe that his own son was crippled by the 7 wounds fist strike, and all he got was a scolding. What a pathetic household. He wondered where those so-called parents were now. Chang Dobo started to say something about Hua Mujin's condition. The room seemed to stretch on forever, the distance between Hua Mujin and Chang Dobo growing with each passing second. The air was thick with unspoken words, the tension almost a living thing. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows across the shrine, each flame a tiny beacon in the growing darkness. The air was heavy with the scent of incense, a silent prayer hanging in the air. Chang Dobo continued, explaining that things had only gotten worse over time. Hua Mujin's father had gone deep into debt, trying everything he could to cure his son's madness. Chang Dobo continued, explaining that 9 years ago, Hua Mujin's mother's illness worsened and she passed away. 3 years later, burdened by debt, his father also died. Hua Mujin listened in silence, his mind racing as he tried to piece together the fragments of his past. His face was unreadable, but inside, a storm of emotions raged. The 3 of them stood silently before the shrine, the flickering candles casting long shadows that danced across the floor. The weight of their shared history hung heavy in the air, a bond forged in loss and hardship. He was a child who ruined his clan, a son who became the reason for his parents' death, and a brother who put his younger siblings in a tough spot. The weight of those words pressed down on him, each syllable a hammer blow to his soul. The flame Hua clan's reputation had ended with him. All that remained at the Bamboo Forest Temple were debts incurred for his sake, 2 loyal retainers, and a handful of martial artists. It was a bleak picture of an once proud clan reduced to nothing. And there were his younger siblings, Hua Dojin, the younger son, and Hua So Yeon, the daughter of the Flame Hua clan. They were his responsibility now, whether he wanted it or not. It was all his fault that their mother and father were dead. The accusation hit him like a physical blow, the raw pain in his sibling's voice cutting deep. He stood there, unable to defend himself against the truth of their words. One sickness had destroyed their entire household, taking everything from them. No wonder the little sister, Hua So-yeon, was so furious, her face a mask of grief. Miles away, the night was silent, the stars twinkling above a lone building. The only sound was the gentle breeze rustling through the trees. Meanwhile, Hua Mujin had been gathering information from the history books in his room. The old pages felt brittle beneath his fingers as he turned them, searching for answers. According to the books, as the divine demon, Zhang Cheon, he died in a battle against the 9 great sects. 30 years had passed since then, a lifetime in the martial world. The vivid sensation of the world told him that this was reality. In short, he now inhabited the body of Hua Mujin, the Flame Hua clan's eldest son, a lunatic with no energy core. Hua Mujin sat alone in the dark room, thinking back. He had killed everyone he needed to kill, he thought, and he had no regrets about that life. He looked down at the drawings in his hands. Hua Dojin and Hua Soyeon had drawn pictures for him, wishing him a speedy recovery. Hua Mujin watched his little brother and sister. They were siblings, huh? He hadn't really thought about it before. Their circumstances were tragic, he thought. They reminded him of those 2 children from his past life. Hua Mujin supposed he'd have to live this life now, and maybe he'd even help those kids, even if it was just a little. But his biggest obstacle, Hua Mujin realized, was the Changhua merchant group. They were the ones who had crippled this body and ruined the clan. Hua Mujin realized he needed to start getting ready for his duel with Chang Dobo, which was set for the 5th day of the month after next. He was going to have to rebuild himself to at least the beginner level before then. Hua Mujin looked determined. Turns out, he was going to have to start all over again from scratch. Hua Mujin sat down in the middle of the room, closing his eyes. He began to meditate, trying to feel the energy within him. This reminded Hua Mujin of when he first started learning martial arts. Back then, even breathing had been super hard. Hua Mujin focused, his face showing the effort. He wouldn't give up, no matter how tough it got. The air around him crackled with energy. He could feel the power starting to gather, like a storm brewing inside him. Hua Mujin realized something was different this time. He thought that maybe it was because this body's natural talent for martial arts was something special. He could feel the energy growing stronger. Hua Mujin realized that he didn't even need to go through the usual steps to sense the energy in his body. He closed his eyes, and the energy flowed even faster. Just closing his eyes was enough to get things started. The energy swirled around him, faster and faster. It was like a whirlpool of power, pulling him deeper into himself. The night sky seemed to mirror the energy surging through Hua Mujin's body. It felt like the stars themselves were aligning with his newfound power. The room around Hua Mujin started to twist and blur as the energy intensified. It was like the world itself was bending to his will. The hallway seemed to stretch out endlessly before him, silent and still. Hua Mujin was completely alone with his thoughts, lost in the depths of his own power. Suddenly, Hua Mujin collapsed to the floor, unconscious. The people around him panicked, shouting, "Young master, what's the matter?" The man checking Hua Mujin's pulse looked up in shock. He stammered, saying that Hua Mujin was dead, but then quickly corrected himself, saying it was a joke. He added that Hua Mujin was perfectly fine, and his pulse was stronger than ever. Hua Mujin was confused as hell. He wondered how he could be healthier now. He asked the old man what was up with his body, since all he tried to do was form an energy core, but the pain was terrible. What was going on? Hua Mujin wondered if his body had some kind of special constitution. Ma Sok explained that if he wanted to know what his constitution was, it was said to be the heavenly martial body. Ma Sok continued, saying that the heavenly martial body was a rare constitution chosen by the heavens, or so he was told by a Shaolin elder monk. Hua Mujin's face turned red with anger. Was Ma Sok laughing at him? Turns out it was the exact opposite of being suited for demonic arts. If a body of pure upright energy tries to practice demonic arts, Ma Sok warned that Hua Mujin would suffer immense pain, and in the worst case, it could result in death. He listed other heavenly constitutions, then urged Hua Mujin to pull himself together. Of all the countless heavenly constitutions, why did he have to get this one? Hua Mujin looked stressed. He thought to himself that the duel was in just over a month, and that was really bad. Hua Mujin wondered who these old men were. Turns out, they were the clan's chief steward Du and elder Zhou. They had such a serious look on their faces, even though the whole place hadn't fallen apart yet. Chief steward of the Flame Hua clan, Do Baekshin, thought that things were worse than they thought. It was time to prepare themselves. But then, elder of the Flame Hua clan, Zhou Huanbong, coughed up blood. Someone shouted that young Master Hua couldn't die yet. Hua Mujin shouted back that he wouldn't die, calling the guy a fool. Outside, the rain poured down on the town, but inside, someone was shouting at Hua Mujin, yelling that he had been laying down for 3 days. Hua Mujin looked down at himself, annoyed. He thought that if this body didn't get stronger, he'd die before the duel even started. Hua Mujin told the person to shut up, complaining that they were making his head ring. More importantly, He declared that he'd need a sword if he was gonna duel. The speaker pointed at the other man, looking absolutely furious. He commanded him to go and get a few swords immediately. The subordinate looked worried, wondering where they'd even get the money for a sword. He thought that this whole household was broke. Hua Mujin explained that they were currently being pursued by an unorthodox sect called the Bangho sect. He added that they had a ridiculous amount of debt because of the sect's crazy high interest rates. Hua Mujin took a breath and realized they were a fallen clan. He declared that the money problems had to be resolved first before anything else. Hua Mujin asked if their debt was already large. Would a bit more really hurt? The other man looked at him, completely shocked by what he was hearing. The other man asked if Hua Mujin was crazy to even suggest loaning more money. Hua Mujin told him to shut up and write up a letter to the two elders right away. Hua Mujin smirked, announcing that he was going out on a walk. He seemed to have something else in mind. The man looked absolutely shocked. He couldn't believe that young Master Hua had gone to the Bangho sect again. The other man didn't seem nearly as concerned. He figured the Bangho sect would just kick Hua Mujin out, but the first man wasn't so sure. He was more worried that the social sect might make their move. Nearby, the Bangho sect building loomed, a dark reminder that they were nothing more than loan sharks. Hua Mujin didn't waste any time. He told the big guy to tell his leader that Hua Mujin of the Flame Hua sect wanted to see him. Bangho sect guard Kong Noho wasn't impressed. He told Hua Mujin to cut the nonsense and get inside if he was there to gamble. Hua Mujin wasn't backing down. He demanded to know why he couldn't see the leader and told the guy to bring him his superior. The Bangho sect guard stammered, saying that their young master was a bit sick. Suddenly, a new voice cut through the air. The Bangho sect member wanted to know what all the commotion was about. The first guard quickly explained that Hua Mujin wanted to see the sect leader. He then asked the newcomer if he was Hua Mujin's superior. The Bangho sect member turned his attention to Hua Mujin, asking why he wanted to meet the leader. He figured it was to loan even more money. The Bangho sect vice leader Ma Jungbo stepped forward. He said that if Hua Mujin was just a customer, there was no need to see the leader at all. The doors to the Bangho sect were wide open, the building brightly lit against the dark sky. A voice called out, inviting them to come on in. Hua Mujin continued forward, ignoring the growing sense of dread. One of the guys with him begged him to turn around. He said he had a bad feeling about all this, especially now that they had made it this far. The guy went on, explaining that Granny Shin had seen the Bangcho sect beat some poor martial artist just a few days ago. He added that in the blink of an eye, the martial artist's chest was split open. Apparently, the attacker knew the Black Hand Twin Killer power, Heavenly Martial Moon Slaying Arts. Hua Mujin stopped, curious. He asked what was so special about the Black Hand Twin Killer power Heavenly Martial Moon Slaying Arts. He wanted to know what the big deal was. The air grew heavy, filled with an unsettling feeling. Something bad was about to happen. He could feel it. The leader of the Bangho sect spoke, his voice echoing through the room. He said that Hua Mujin's servant seemed to catch on faster than he did. The leader added that it was too late for them to head back now. The Bangho sect members drew their swords, ready to attack. The leader gave the order for the fight to begin. The air crackled with tension as the two sides prepared to clash. The Bangho sect leader continued, his voice laced with sarcasm. He asked if this was Hua Mujin's intention from the start. He added that he couldn't beat the trash out of the eldest son of the Flame Hua clan in a place where everyone could see. The Bangho sect leader sneered, his words dripping with disdain. He said that for someone who wasn't even paying back interest, Hua Mujin had no shame. He added that he didn't intend on letting Hua Mujin leech off of them like his parents did. Hua Mujin's companion fell to his knees, begging for mercy. He apologized for coming there and pleaded for the Bangho sect to spare Hua Mujin's life. He asked what the leader meant by like my parents. Hua Mujin looked at the Bangho sect leader and said that he didn't have any parents. The statement hung in the air, heavy, with unspoken meaning. The cavern was silent, save for the dripping of water from the ceiling. The Bangho sect members surrounded Hua Mujin, waiting for his next move. Hua Mujin paused for a moment, then said that he remembered himself from when he was Zhang Cheon. He declared that they would begin. Hua Mujin gave the order to just teach them a lesson. The Bangho sect members responded that they understood. A Bangho sect member charged at Hua Mujin, yelling that he would beat the trash out of him, but he was immediately cut off by something. Hua Mujin grabbed the attacker's ankle before he could even blink. He yanked the guy's feet out from under him. The Bangho sect member was lifted off the ground, shaking and spasming. Lightning crackled around him. The Bangho sect member screamed in pain, accusing Hua Mujin of playing dirty. He yelled that Hua Mujin thought they were just rats, but Hua Mujin's bones were too soft for his size. Hua Mujin stared at his hand, thinking that with this weak body, it was better to do things this way than to use pure power. He had to be smart about this. mess. Hua Mujin pointed forward, asking what they were waiting for. He was ready to keep going. The order came to finish him off. Hua Mujin didn't hesitate. He swung his sword down with incredible speed. Hua Mujin kept slashing, each strike aimed to end the fight. The air itself seemed to crackle with the force of his blows. The Bangho sect member was getting desperate. He yelled that Hua Mujin was nothing but a rat. Hua Mujin realized that he couldn't just rely on brute strength. Since he couldn't match the guy's power, he needed to stay mobile. The Bangho sect member was hit hard. He choked in pain and cursed Hua Mujin. Hua Mujin suddenly said, "Huh?" Something unexpected had clearly happened. He was caught off guard mid-air. Then he muttered, "Huh?" It was a complete mess. Several fighters were being thrown back like rag dolls. One of the Bangho sect members choked out a painful "Kirk!" He was clutching his chest, clearly hit hard. Hua Mujin stood tall above the fallen fighters. He had completely turned the situation around. Two Bangho sect members kneeled on the ground, beaten. The fight was over, and they had lost badly. The Bangho sect guard, Kang Noho, looked absolutely shocked and shouted, asking if the young master was okay. He was clearly not expecting the fight to turn around so fast. Hua Mujin stood over the fallen fighters and casually said that he was fine. Then he asked what the hell kind of martial arts the guard had just used. The Bangho sect guard, Kang Noho, said it wasn't martial arts, just something he picked up on the streets. Hua Mujin seemed a bit surprised, wondering when the guard had time to wander the streets, but he admitted it wasn't bad. Hua Mujin was surrounded by a strange purple energy. He warned that the guard should try dodging this as well, clearly about to launch another attack. Hua Mujin sat in a lotus position, completely still. The energy around him pulsed, showing he was in total control. Hua Mujin looked down in confusion. He noticed a coin lying on the ground and wondered what it meant. Bangho sect vice leader Ma Jungbo arrived, shouting at the other guards to get lost. He said he would handle Hua Mujin himself. Hua Mujin shouted, asking if it was that hard to just talk to their leader. The Bangho sect vice leader Ma Jungbo replied that the leader wasn't someone Hua Mujin was allowed to meet. Bangho sect vice leader Ma Jungbo didn't waste any time. He yelled that Hua Mujin would be crushed and launched himself forward. The impact was intense, sending a shockwave through the air. Everything was engulfed in a blinding flash of light. Hua Mujin was surrounded by a whirlwind of energy, glowing with power. He stared down at his hand, shocked to see a chopstick in his grip. A chopstick? He thought. Hua Mujin stared at the chopstick, a grin spreading across his face. He said that he didn't have a sword, so he just brought a substitute, but it wasn't bad. The chopstick and sword clashed, sending sparks flying everywhere. The force of the impact echoed through the air, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Bangho sect vice leader Ma Jungbo stared in disbelief. He thought that Hua Mujin was using some never-before-seen martial arts. Hua Mujin saw an opening, a gap, he thought, ready to strike. Bangho sect vice leader Ma Jungbo was stunned. How could Hua Mujin not only block a sword with chopsticks, but also find an opening? Bangho sect vice leader Ma Jungbo swung his sword with a shout. He was absolutely furious. Hua Mujin smirked. He warned that if you underestimate chopsticks, you might end up regretting it. Hua Mujin moved with impossible speed, the chopsticks a blur in his hands. He said that you might end up shitting yourself if you weren't careful. Bangho sect vice leader Ma Jungbo stumbled back, shocked by the force of the attack. He couldn't believe Hua Mujin had so much power. Bangho sect vice leader Ma Jungbo was reeling. How could Hua Mujin have reached this level in such a short time? He wondered if Hua Mujin was really from the Huang family's Sword Watch clan. He had heard about their debt classification, and now he wondered who they might be. Bangho sect vice leader Ma Jungbo spat out blood. He couldn't believe he was getting pushed back by this guy. He choked out that Hua Mujin tried to take money from them with such terrible skills. Hua Mujin didn't let up. He moved in for another strike. He wasn't about to give the Bangho sect vice leader a chance to recover. Hua Mujin pressed the attack. He asked if the vice leader wanted a taste of that martial arts he looked down upon. He acted confused and asked when he ever did that. Hua Mujin declared that his jokes ended here. Hua Mujin unleashed his ultimate technique. He shouted the name of the move: Black Hand Twin, Killer Power, Heavenly Martial Moon, Slaying Arts. Hua Mujin stared down at the Bangho sect members. He told them that they were the ones joking around. Hua Mujin was surrounded by dark purple energy. He declared that they were the ones who were the joke. Bangho sect vice leader Ma Jungbo, looked absolutely shocked. He stammered, asking how Hua Mujin dodged. The force of Hua Mujin's strike sent Bangko sect vice leader Ma Jungbo flying. Ma Jungbo wondered how Hua Mujin had been hiding so much power until now. Bangko sect vice leader Ma Jungbo coughed up blood. He cursed Hua Mujin, asking how he intended to deal with the aftermath of this. Hua Mujin stood his ground, ignoring the threats from the Bangko sect members. He made it clear that he wasn't there to listen to their nonsense. Hua Mujin's fist clenched, the power radiating from him. He warned them that if they told him what he wanted to know, he might extend their lives a little. A red aura flared around Hua Mujin as he stood there, waiting for an answer. He asked them again, wondering if they would finally let him loan some money. Hua Mujin felt the energy coursing through him, a surge he hadn't experienced in what felt like forever. He was really enjoying this, he realized. The two men watched Hua Mujin, clearly worried about what he was doing. One of them muttered that this was bad for the young master, such a waste of energy. The men at the tables, surrounded by dice and gambling, looked up nervously. One of them stammered, asking Hua Mujin what he wanted to know. One of the men tried to deny any bad intentions, but he was clearly sweating. Hua Mujin could practically hear their brains working overtime, trying to come up with a believable lie. Hua Mujin's eyes narrowed, a red aura intensifying around him. He warned them to think carefully before speaking. He added that if he shoved enough dice down their throats, they wouldn't be able to speak at all. Hua Mujin learned that the orders were coming from the Changhua merchant group. He realized that he knew those rats were involved. He asked what kind of deal they had made with them. The Bangko sect member started to answer, but he was clearly struggling to find the right words. He stammered, trying to avoid the question. Hua Mujin scoffed, telling the guy that he wasn't some proud sage or warrior. He added that if he wanted to be loyal, he should save it for his underlings, because the merchant scumbags wouldn't give a damn even if his limbs got chopped off. Hua Mujin pointed out that the whole place had been burned down that night. The air crackled with heat and the smell of smoke. The Bangko sect member finally cracked, admitting that they had a secret contract. He explained that the Changhua merchant group told them to leave the Hua clan with as much money as they needed, but with an interest so high that it would be enough to make them fall into the hellish depths of debt. The Bangko sect member confessed that, in exchange for making the Flame Hua clan fall, they were promised the Hua clan's land. They were also supposed to get rewards just to make them happy. Hua Mujin realized that the Changhua merchant group was after their clan's land. He asked how much the 300 gold niang he was borrowing would add up to after a year. He knew the contract said it would be 5,000 gold niang. He laughed, saying that they were real funny. Hua Mujin waved his hand, telling them that they should move on. He looked absolutely bored. Hua Mujin leaned forward, asking who cleaned up after their messes. He was clearly trying to figure out the bigger picture. The Bangko sect member explained that the Social sect, one of the four martial heavens, was the one who cleaned up after them. He added that it hadn't been long since they joined the alliance of unorthodox sects. Hua Mujin muttered that the four martial heavens were messy bastards. The subordinate asked if he was okay. The subordinate said that Hua Mujin had never met them before, asking what he was going on about. Hua Mujin told him not to worry about it, saying he didn't feel like explaining. He then asked why the guy who went to get the money was so late, adding that if they just gave them a bit more time. A man sprinted through the building, carrying a heavy chest. He was sweating and looked completely exhausted. The man held up the chest, announcing that here was 300 gold niang. He was breathing heavily. Hua Mujin said, "Good, good," adding that this should be enough. He reached into the chest and grabbed a handful of the gold coins. Hua Mujin told the subordinate to take the money. The subordinate asked if they should really be borrowing it. Hua Mujin told him to shut up and take it. The rain poured down on the building. The lanterns glowed dimly through the downpour. Hua Mujin told them to write today's loan down on their books. He looked completely unconcerned about the implications. Hua Mujin said that once he'd settled everything with the Changhua merchant group, he'd come back and pay their debt. He seemed pretty confident. Hua Mujin added that it looked like they were taking a bunch of money from peasants. He told them not to go too far. He didn't want them to get too greedy. The man in the straw hat warned that if they crossed the line, he was going to screw them over. The other man stammered nervously, saying that they understood. The man in the straw hat looked up at the pouring rain, a sinister glint in his eye. He muttered that he wanted to see who got screwed over first. Far away, someone yelled for the young master. It sounded like something bad had happened. The man in the straw hat looked down and saw that he was covered in blood. He immediately denied that it was his. Hua Mujin asked what the hell had happened over at the Bangko sect. He said he'd just gone to borrow a bit of money because he heard they were in need. The man in the straw hat told the other man that they needed to feed their martial artists well. He was worried that they'd all run away if they didn't get enough food. The man with the treasure chest was asked where he'd stolen it from. The other man was suspicious because there was no way the Bangho sect would lend them anything. He told him to make sure to write it down in their books, though. Hua Mujin told them that they just needed to worry about feeding and clothing his siblings well. He wished Chief Steward good luck with a smile. One of the men wondered if the other had heard of a disease that made someone go mad like that. They were clearly talking about Hua Mujin. In the darkness, a hand struck a match and lit a candle. The small flame flickered, casting long shadows across the room. The room was silent, lit only by the flickering candles on the altar. Hua Mujin stood there, ready to make his prayers. Hua Mujin admitted that he wasn't sure what to say, since he never had parents. Hua Mujin assured his siblings that the money issues were somewhat resolved. He promised them that he would take good care of them and the servants so they could rest easy. Hua Mujin casually mentioned to his siblings that he had promised to fight some idiot named Chong Dobo in a few days. He said it was for some secret scroll of their clan. Hua Mujin grinned, telling them not to worry. He was going to break that Chong Dobo's neck, he declared. The altar was quiet, the only sound being the soft crackle of the candles. The flames danced, casting shadows on the walls. Under the moonlight, the building stood tall. The night was silent, with only the wind whistling through the trees. The men wondered what Hua Mujin had ordered. They were curious and eager to see what all the fuss was about. The workers finally finished moving the heavy boxes. One of them said that it felt like his spine was going to snap. He suggested they grab a drink and relax. Hua Mujin rushed in, asking if it was here. He looked impatient. The weights were all present, and the labels were correct. He could see that there was a 30, 48, and 66 kilogram weight. Hua Mujin asked what he would even use these for, since the warriors carrying them were struggling. He figured he'd need a sword for something. Hua Mujin said he was obviously going to swing it. He figured he'd start with an easy 50 jin. Someone asked Hua Mujin if he was really going to swing that heavy thing. It looked like he was struggling. Hua Mujin realized he couldn't even raise 50 jin. He figured this might be the case, but he was clearly frustrated that his body was so weak. Hua Mujin strained every muscle in his body to lift the weight, but it wouldn't budge. But he refused to give up, no matter how hard it was. Hua Mujin grunted, finally managing to lift the sword a little, using both hands. He was still struggling, but at least he could pick it up somewhat. Hua Mujin told Ma Sok to stop staring and do as he was ordered. He was clearly annoyed by the constant attention. Hua Mujin told Ma Sok to make sure to include lots of meat in his meals. He couldn't help but worry about getting enough nutrients. Hua Mujin gripped the sword tightly, his knuckles turning white. He was determined to get stronger, no matter what it took. Hua Mujin held the sword high above his head, but he only had 2 weeks before the duel. He had to get stronger and fast. Hua Mujin realized that his body was the heavenly martial body, the polar opposite of the demonic arts he had mastered before. So, he figured he had no choice but to learn the martial art of his master's friend, the peerless 9 swords. Hua Mujin swung the sword with all his might, trying to get a feel for the new style. Each movement was awkward, but he kept pushing himself. Hua Mujin knew this was his only way out. He had to master this new style if he wanted to survive the duel and protect his clan. The sickle sliced through the air with amazing precision. The person holding it clearly knew what they were doing. The man played his instrument, but he seemed distracted. He was thinking about the rumors he heard. He wondered aloud if Hua Mujin really beat up the Bangho lackeys. The other man confirmed that Hua Mujin had indeed beaten them up, leaving them unable to move for almost 2 weeks. But he was confused. How could Hua Mujin, who lacked an energy core, have done something like that? The man grinned, showing his teeth. He figured Hua Mujin wasn't a nobody after all. He smirked to himself. Maybe he should prepare a present for the great flame Hua clan heir. He seemed to have some potential. He swung the instrument, feeling the weight of it in his hands. He was actually getting excited for the day of the duel. It was going to be fun. Hua Mujin stared at the blindfolded man, a smirk playing on his lips. He challenged him, saying he was going to see his hidden side. Hua Mujin jumped up high, launching himself forward. He dove head first into the darkness, trusting whatever waited on the other side. He spun in mid-air, putting all his weight behind a single kick. The force of it cracked the air itself. He landed hard, his foot slamming against the ground. The force of the impact echoed around him. Hua Mujin examined his fist, flexing his fingers. He muttered that this was the heavenly martial body, and if it was really granted by the heavens, it should be able to withstand at least this much. He reached out, grabbing a small box filled with pills. He was going to need every advantage he could get to strengthen his body. Hua Mujin looked up, realizing that Masak had already gotten everything ready that he had asked for. He knew he could count on him. Hua Mujin clenched his fist, a surge of determination coursing through him. He muttered that it was starting now. Hua Mujin began his training, the solitary 9 swords first form, declaration form. He swung his sword with purpose, ready to master the technique. Hua Mujin kept training, declaring that he carried his sword and stepped forward at any time. He wouldn't let anything block his path, not even Mount I. Hua Mujin continued to train, the sound of his sword slicing through the air echoing around him. He was completely focused, lost in the rhythm of his movements. Hua Mujin shifted his stance, preparing to unleash the solitary 9 swords, second form, breaking form. The air crackled around him as he focused his energy. Hua Mujin swung his sword, a blue streak of light cutting through the air. He was going to shatter any weapon that dared to come at him. Hua Mujin gritted his teeth, sweat dripping down his face. He was already reaching his limits, and he hadn't even been training that long. He planted his foot firmly on the ground, his muscles screaming in protest. Hua Mujin had to endure, no matter what. Hua Mujin pushed through the pain, swinging his sword with renewed vigor. Energy crackled around the blade, a testament to his growing power. Hua Mujin launched himself into the air, a whirlwind of energy swirling around him. The power of his sword technique was starting to show, and he was ready to unleash the next form. He was about to use Form 3, Sky-Cleaving Form. You could feel the intensity building, like the air itself was about to be torn apart. Hua Mujin focused all his energy into the sword, ready to strike. He declared that even if the enemy's energy shook the heavens, it would split before his sword. He moved like lightning, his sword a blur of blue light. The force of his attack was incredible, like he was trying to cut the world in half. He landed hard, stumbling forward. Hua Mujin cried out, feeling a sharp pain in his back. He had pushed himself too far. Hua Mujin's sword pierced through the training object with incredible force. He shouted for the next trial to begin, showing no sign of slowing down. Bamboo sticks rained down as Hua Mujin's sword moved with impossible speed. The air itself seemed to crackle with the force of his training. Hua Mujin continued to strike, each swing of his sword a perfect dance of destruction. He was completely focused, lost in the rhythm of his training. Hua Mujin channeled his energy, preparing to unleash Form 4, Void Cleaving Form. He declared that no martial art could stand before his blade. Hua Mujin struck with blinding speed, his sword a blur of motion. He believed that all complicated techniques would fail before his natural talent. Hua Mujin's sword slammed into the training object, sending vibrations through his arm. He couldn't believe it. He said he didn't land a single hit. Hua Mujin slammed his fist into the ground, a wave of force rippling outwards. He was clearly pissed. The training room was now a mess of splintered wood, evidence of his frustration. The air hung heavy with the scent of broken wood and lingering energy. Hua Mujin took a deep breath, refocusing his mind. He was ready to unleash Form 5, Army Slaughtering Form. Hua Mujin declared that even if a horde of enemies swarmed him, they would all kneel before his sword. His eyes burned with a fierce determination. Hua Mujin soared through the air, his sword crackling with energy. He declared that an ant swarm could never surpass an elephant, and that numbers meant nothing before true strength. The sword flashed, cutting through the air with a speed that was hard to follow. The force behind it was enough to make the air itself tremble. Suddenly, a log came crashing down towards Hua Mujin's head. He gasped, realizing he had been too focused on his sword and not enough on his surroundings. Hua Mujin looked absolutely furious. He shouted that this was total garbage, demanding the next challenge immediately. Hua Mujin took a deep breath, calming himself. He then began to perform Form 6, 1/ parts still water, declaring that even a floating leaf on water would be split in two by this blade. He declared that everything had been deactivated. The only thing left was the outside. Hua Mujin unleashed Form 7, 1 point, Twin Earths. He explained that the sword could open the earth beneath, and if it could cut the ground, then size no longer mattered. The blindfolded man was starting to sweat. He wondered why Hua Mujin was still okay. Hua Mujin continued, unleashing Form 8, Heaven, Sundering Form. He declared that even the sky would be split by his blade, wondering if there was anything left in the world he couldn't cleave. The sword hummed with power, ready to cut through anything. Hua Mujin lay on the ground, his sword beside him. He thought to himself that he had finally cut both himself and his sword, and now he had had no reason to hold the sword anymore. The blindfolded man's eyes twitched. He realized that in the end, Hua Mujin's skills were just mimicry. The blindfolded man's hand tightened around the hilt of his sword. The air crackled with anticipation, ready for the next strike. Hua Mujin stood with his little brother, telling him that this was the final form, self-cleaving form. He asked if the boy had memorized it, but the little brother replied that he had, but wondered if an unworthy sword style like that deserved to be called a sword art. Little brother continued, saying that even the explanations were unbearably cringy. He thought cutting earth, sky, your sword, and even yourself sounded like something a kid made up trying to sound cool. The blindfolded man looked serious. He said he wouldn't deny what little brother had said, but then asked if his close friend's sword legacy should really end like this. He wanted Hua Mujin to take it up instead. The blindfolded man continued, saying that the swordsman was the only one who could stand toe-to-toe with him. He then asked how that was even possible with no inner power. The blindfolded man explained that the swordsman probably used moving internal skill. He added that the swordsman had insisted it be passed on to someone not part of any sect, because those within the sect couldn't fully learn it. Little brother scoffed, asking if the blindfolded man was talking about moving internal skill. He called it a trash tier method. The blindfolded man snapped, telling little brother to shut up and accept that that's how it was. Little brother reluctantly replied, "Fine, okay." The blindfolded man kept explaining that if he swung the sword style 1,000 times, his body would start changing. He said that after 100,000 swings, sword aura would appear, and after 1,000,000 swings, almost no one could beat him. That's what the swordsman had told him anyway. Hua Mujin asked if practicing 1,000 times a day meant he'd master the technique in 3 years. He then wondered if the swordsman had really been as strong as the blindfolded man. The blindfolded man admitted he couldn't say for sure, but a fight between them would have ended in death. Hua Mujin was curious what kind of man the swordsman had been. He wondered about his life and his motivations. Suddenly, someone punched Hua Mujin hard, sending him sprawling. The attacker was on top of Hua Mujin. He stammered, relieved that Hua Mujin was all right. He had been worried when Hua Mujin didn't get up right away. He then threatened to kill him if he hit him again. Hua Mujin woke up, annoyed that he'd fainted after just one sword form. He realized he wasn't even doing 1,000 swings a day yet, and he knew he still had a long road ahead. He figured it was late, so he might as well eat. A tray was placed in front of him, piled high with steaming pork. There was also a bowl of rice and a small dish of sauce. Hua Mujin asked if it was pork. The other man explained that he had asked for meat side dishes the day before. He added that it had been so long since they'd had meat, so they should enjoy it. Hua Mujin declared that starting tomorrow, he wanted beef. The other man looked surprised, asking, "Beef?" Hua Mujin confirmed it, saying beef would build muscle better. Hua Mujin said that if money was an issue, he should use the funds from the loan syndicate. He told the other man not to worry and that he'd borrow more later. He added that until he fought Chong Dobo, he'd be eating 3 meals a day. The other man asked when Hua Mujin had started learning that martial art, and Hua Mujin asked if it was weird. Masak said it was weird that a guy who couldn't even function like a normal person was suddenly mastering sword techniques. Hua Mujin just kept eating. Masak said he was amazed. He mentioned how Hua Mujin didn't know any martial arts before, but then he used a chopstick to beat up the guards of the loan syndicate, and now he had this crazy sword style. Hua Mujin said he'd already told his siblings, so he figured telling Masak didn't matter. He seemed calm about it. Hua Mujin revealed that he wasn't really the eldest son, Hua Mujin. He claimed his real identity was the divine demon. Masak looked like he was about to say something, but Hua Mujin cut him off, saying he only worried about one thing. Hua Mujin feared that someday, like before, he'd lose his memory again and change into someone else, and then disappear without a word. The thought terrified him. Masak looked worried and grabbed at his shirt, asking if Hua Mujin was thinking of abandoning the Yomhwa clan. He seemed genuinely concerned. Hua Mujin sat there calmly and said he would never abandon the clan, not until Yonma became the strongest martial family in Sichuan. He added that he didn't really have anything else to do, and then repeated himself, emphasizing that he meant the strongest in Sichuan. Masak looked at him like he was crazy. He thought it was ridiculous that Hua Mujin was talking about making the clan the strongest. Hua Mujin just flicked Masak on the forehead, clearly annoyed by his disbelief. Hua Mujin told Masak to get out if he was done yapping. Masak, looking a little hurt, said, "Fine, fine, and started to leave. The wind howled around him, but he didn't seem to notice. He was all wrapped up in bandages, like he'd just gone through hell. Hua Mujin was surrounded by this crazy blue energy. He was thinking that being the strongest in Sichuan should be enough for him. Someone started pouring tea, the hot liquid steaming as it filled the cup. It was a moment of peace before everything went down. The guy at the table was talking about the duel. It was supposed to happen in 10 days between Chang Dobo and young master Hua Mujin. He seemed pretty focused on it. The bearded guy with glasses was sure that Chang Dobo was going to try to kill young Master Hua, and after that, he figured Chang Dobo would be after the Yom Emperor's inheritance. Masak suggested they just run away before the duel even happened. He asked Hua Mujin to think carefully about his decision. Masak was sitting in a room, waiting for Hua Mujin's answer. Masak declared that he wouldn't let the last two members of the family get hurt. He looked determined, like he was ready to do anything to protect them. The two kids stood behind him, listening intently. Hua Mujin stood there, sword in hand, ready to train. The air around him seemed to crackle with energy, like he was about to unleash something big. Hua Mujin swung the sword, putting all his strength into it. He thought to himself that just swinging a sword every day had built some muscle on his arm, and he'd finally reached the point where he could swing a gliniron sword with one hand. But he wondered why his sword technique was still unstable. Hua Mujin paused, wiping sweat from his forehead. He remembered that there was only a week left until the martial arts competition. Someone off to the side mentioned that he was still training hard. The little brother and little sister stood there, looking up at Hua Mujin. The little brother asked what had brought them there. Hua Mujin told them it was dangerous, and they should go play somewhere else. He admitted he'd been worried and had been watching them for a few days, thinking he might be overdoing it with his training. The little sister stood there, with tears in her eyes, confessing that Hua Mujin was doing this because of her harsh words. She sobbed, saying it was all her fault that their parents had died, because she had been so angry at that time. The bandaged man watched the children with a sad look on his face. He mumbled that whenever he saw kids like them, he was reminded of someone. The little sister looked up, trying to offer some comfort. She told him it was fine, and he shouldn't worry about it. The little brother started copying Hua Mujin's stance, trying to mimic his movements. He exclaimed that Hua Mujin's stance was incredible, and he looked like a real martial artist. The little sister giggled, pointing out that the little brother's stance was completely different from Hua Mujin's. The bandaged man watched them, thinking the kid was cute, as he tried to imitate Hua Mujin. Hua Mujin watched the kids, and it reminded him of when he trained with his master. He told them to stretch more. Hua Mujin's master told him that when swinging the sword, he should exhale as long as possible and absolutely not rush. Then, when returning to position, he needed to inhale slowly and shortly. Hua Mujin confirmed that he understood. He remembered his master saying that the most important thing in the solitary 9 swords was the breathing method of the pupil. Hua Mujin realized he had forgotten his master's words. He clenched his fist. Hua Mujin said not to worry about anything, because he would definitely win. He looked absolutely determined. The bandaged figure told the little brother and little sister to go back to their room now. There was something in the way he said it that made them both flinch. The little brother and little sister looked at each other, clearly uneasy. The little brother asked if nothing would happen, and the little sister guessed that nothing would. Rain poured down hard that night, and the wind howled through the trees. It was the kind of night that made you want to stay inside. Hua Mujin swung his sword, focusing on his master's teachings. He remembered his master saying that when swinging the sword, he should exhale as long as possible, and absolutely not rush. When returning to position, Hua Mujin inhaled slowly and shortly, just like his master had taught him. He felt the power flowing through his body. Hua Mujin poured out all the internal energy he had gathered in his body at once. The force of it sent debris flying everywhere. He had done it. Success. Debris rained down around Hua Mujin as he stood there, breathing heavily. The system chimed in, identifying the skill he had just used. Pupil. It was a qigong that built internal energy by directly moving the body. The system then warned him that compared to other qigong that perform energy circulation through meditation, pupil was classified as a lower-class martial art. Apparently, significant development of energy circulation was hard to expect from it. The rain continued to fall, each drop echoing the system's grim assessment. The weather seemed to mirror the bleak outlook for his training. Hua Mujin felt the energy flowing through him as he trained. He knew that in awakening such pupil, what was important was a stable breathing method. The sword moved with incredible speed, slicing through the air with a sound like tearing silk. Unlike before, when swinging the sword was difficult, Hua Mujin felt his body gradually stabilize. It was all because of breathing, according to the sword technique. Hua Mujin kept at it, pushing his body to the limit. Sweat poured down his face as he swung the sword again and again, his muscles burning with each repetition. After repeating the sword technique dozens of times like that, the dantian that had been scattered for years slowly began to condense. It was a long and arduous process, but he was finally making progress. The chopsticks picked up a slice of meat. The taste was rich and savory. One of the men asked if young Master Hua was still training. He seemed curious about Hua Mujin's progress. The other man said that Hua Mujin had become a completely different person. He added that at first, Hua Mujin kept collapsing, but now he didn't even show signs of it. One of the men commented that the divine energy treatment Hua Mujin received from the Mudang before seemed to have been effective, but the man was also worried that Hua Mujin was going to die like that. The other man put his hand on his head, confused. He wondered if the treatment of Wudang Baekshon shouldn't improve in just one session. One of the men reported that if any problem occurred, he would take care of it. He confirmed that he understood the instructions. Meanwhile, someone called out to Hua Mujin, letting him know it was time to eat. The man's voice echoed across the training grounds. Hua Mujin was training when he heard the call. He replied that he was coming. Hua Mujin looked down at his hand, surprised. He realized that the training area was too small, far too narrow to continue his training. Hua Mujin grinned, making a decision. He announced that he should use the training ground from now on. The sky was wide open, stretching far above the training grounds. The air felt crisp, full of promise. The two men stared intently, their faces hard. Something was definitely up, and it didn't look good. Suddenly, everyone noticed something was off. There were guests, which was unusual for a training day. A messenger nervously spoke to the warriors. He stammered that young Master Hua Mujin had decided to use the large training ground. The messenger looked around, making sure everyone had heard him. He asked, confirming, "You all heard me, right?" HWA Mujin announced that he needed to train alone, so he'd be using the large training ground for a while. He added that everyone else's should use the other training ground nearby. One of the warriors scoffed, asking what this half-dead corpse was even saying. He added that just swinging a sword didn't make anyone a martial artist, especially without even a drop of blood on the blade. HWA Mujin noticed the looks in their eyes and said that they were quite challenging. Even if he was the young master, this was sudden. Kyeolboin called out to everyone to step back. He said that since young master HWA Mujin had decided to train in martial arts, they should give him space. Kyeolboin watched HWA Mujin and thought to himself that the madness had erupted again. One of the warriors walked away from HWA Mujin, calling him a dull talent and telling him to stop. From the ground, HWA Mujin looked up at the warrior, clearly annoyed. HWA Mujin stared at the warrior and said if he had complaints, he should say it to his face. He added that only cowards bottled things up. The attacker looked back at the group and asked what he was suggesting. He said that among people who ate by the sword, what could they do if there were complaints? HWA Mujin stared intensely at the attacker. He wasn't going to back down. HWA Mujin grabbed his sword and said that they had to fight it out. He looked absolutely ready to beat the warrior. The attacker looked down at HWA Mujin, warning that even if the world had gone crazy, no real fighter would ever draw a sword against the future leader of the clan. He was dead serious. The attacker continued, saying there's a saying, a dog that bites doesn't bark, and a barking dog is just full of fear. He was trying to make a point about strength and intimidation. The attacker told HWA Mujin that if he wasn't going to step up, he shouldn't even start barking. He told him to live like a scared dog with its tail between its legs, obviously trying to provoke him. HWA Mujin's hand tightened around the hilt of his sword. The air crackled with tension as he prepared to fight. He wasn't backing down. HWA Mujin stared at the attacker. Mujin's grip tightened around the hilt of his sword, the energy pulsing around it. He was ready to unleash everything he had. HWA Mujin declared that regret wouldn't help the attacker at all. Meanwhile, the attacker was already moving, a blur of steel and fury. HWA Mujin held his sword high and declared that he wasn't the type to feel regret. He looked absolutely sure of himself. The impact of the blow shook the ground as HWA Mujin struck. The attacker's sword spun away, clattering to the ground. HWA Mujin didn't waste a second. He kicked the attacker hard, sending him flying backwards. The fight had already taken a toll on HWA Mujin. A trickle of blood ran down his face from a cut, showing just how close the attacker had come to landing a serious blow. The crowd watching the fight was getting restless. One of them shouted in in disbelief, wondering why Hwamujin was fighting without his sword. He also questioned what those moves were. Hwamujin dodged and weaved between the attacks, avoiding the strikes. He moved with a strange grace, like he was dancing between the blades. The crowd's frustration grew as Hwamujin continued to dodge. One of the spectators yelled at young master Hwamujin, telling him to stop dodging and face the attacks with his sword. Hwamujin gripped the sword tightly, looking at the person who had yelled at him. He agreed that he was right, and it was time to stop dodging. The attacker reached out, his hand surrounded by a strange red energy. He shouted that it had been 25 years since he entered the clan, and now it was all young Master Hwa's fault that the clan had fallen so low. The attacker's grip tightened around his shield. He was ready to attack again, and he looked absolutely furious. Young Master Hwa held two swords, pointing down. The attacker questioned how he could preach about martial arts after everything that had happened. The bearded man watched the fight with narrowed eyes. He looked like he was ready to jump in at any moment. The attacker yelled at young Master Hwa to know his place. He charged forward, ready to strike, but young Master Hwa met him head on. Young Master Hwa unleashed the solitary 9 swords, second form. The air around him crackled with energy as the swords moved with incredible speed. He then switched to breaking form, his swords clashing against the attacker's shield. The force of each strike echoed through the training ground. The attacker stumbled back, his face contorted in disbelief. He stammered, asking how even his internal energy could be shaken by this technique. Young Master Hwa's sword flashed, leaving a trail of blood in its wake. He said that everything the attacker had said was true, but things were about to change. Young Master Hwa stood tall, his eyes burning with determination. He declared that from now on, things would be different for the clan. The attacker was completely stunned. He asked himself how this was even possible, as young Master Hwa's gaze, once clouded, was now totally different. The attacker could only stare at young Master Hwa. He realized he was seeing the eyes of a true warrior, burning with resolve. The attacker was sent flying. He crashed to the ground, defeated and humiliated. The onlookers were in total disbelief. They asked each other if young Master Hwa actually won, their faces a mix of shock and confusion. Little brother rushed onto the training ground, running straight to young Master Hwa. He shouted, asking if his brother was all right, his voice filled with worry. Young Master Hwa turned to face the crowd, his expression unreadable. He asked if anyone had any complaints, his voice calm but firm. One of the onlookers called out, branding the defeated warrior a coward. The other man immediately asked how he could say that. The man yelled that the defeated warrior knew he couldn't face young Master Hwa at his full strength. He then demanded silence, trying to shut down the argument. The defeated warrior, kneeling on the ground, finally conceded defeat. The word hung in the air, heavy with the weight of his loss. Young Master Hwa watched silently, his gaze sweeping over the defeated warrior and the stunned crowd. The training ground was quiet, save for the sound of the wind. Young Master Hwa told the kneeling warrior that he had learned from this and to step down. He then told the others to show some loyalty and to stop interfering. He wanted everyone to move to the training ground next door. The crowd started to move, heading towards the training ground next door. They were probably curious to see what young Master Hwa would do next. Young Master Hwa turned to Masak and told him to follow. Masak looked surprised, but didn't say anything. One of the onlookers muttered that even if he's the young master, this was going too far. He looked genuinely worried. One of the men asked why the other had held back. The second man snapped back that he was going to half kill the guy. One of the men stammered, asking if young Master Hwa really looked like someone who would spout empty words. Another admitted that it did seem like the mad young master had gained a heavenly opportunity. The image of Hwamujin flashed in his mind, showing that the young master had gained immense power. He was ready to fight. The first man wondered when young Master Hwa could have gained such power. He looked confused. Another one of the men looked up at the sky, deciding that since the young master had changed, it was probably fine. He seemed to be trying to convince himself. Night fell, and the Hwa clan was silent. The building stood tall against the night sky. The man stood in the room, surrounded by burning candles. He announced that the next day, they would have a duel with the Changhua Merchant Guild. Elder Joe asked how many years it had been since they entered this clan. He figured it had been about 37 years, which felt like a long time. The memory of Lord Yomjae flashed in his mind, showing how unmatched he was back in his youth. He remembered how Lord Yomjae appeared alone, and even the naughty Yang clan had no choice but to acknowledge his martial skills. Elder Joe recalled that they had both sworn to devote their lives, drawn by Lord Yomjae's radiance. The man looked to the side, his expression serious. He accused them of breaking that vow now. The man in the room insisted that this wasn't betraying Lord Yomja. He argued that they had to carry on his bloodline and martial legacy somehow. Another voice responded that he knew, and that the man didn't need to convince him of that. The man looked at the portrait, his face grim. He thought about how he had spent 17 years tending to young Master Hua's madness, and 17 years protecting the Yomhua clan as it withered away. The man turned to another and said that even if they met Lord Yomji in the afterlife, he wouldn't blame them. He then asked if the preparations were complete, since there wasn't much to do. He mentioned a little silver to secure a new place, and that only a handful of warriors and a few servants remained. The first man looked at the other, his expression heavy. He told the other to go on ahead, his voice barely a whisper. The man insisted that even so, young Master Hua was still of his bloodline, and someone had to be there to tend to his body. He added that a master hired by the Changhua Merchant Guild would be there to serve as a witness to tomorrow's duel. The man looked at the other with disgust, saying that they bragged about theft, like it was something to be proud of. He realized that they meant to make their victory official, solidifying their dominance. The speaker spat out that the Changhua Merchant Guild were vicious snakes. He added that they'd burn this place until not even the roots remained. He was furious. Someone ordered them to go on to the agreed spot and wait. He added that the two young ones would be shocked enough as it was. One of them said that the meat felt tougher lately, and asked if it was just him. The other agreed, saying that the cheaper cuts from cattle were always the toughest. One of them asked if the other was already out of money. The other responded asking how he would know, since the chief steward barely gave them any. The first one then asked if he was sulking, and the other denied sulking over something so petty. He then asked why the first one had said they should run and get him punched. A hand reached out, as if to grab someone. The tension was thick in the air, and anything could happen. Hua Mujin straightened his robes, adjusting the folds with a practiced hand. He then asked how his look was today, clearly caring about his appearance even before a fight. The other man looked at Hua Mujin with a critical eye. He said honestly that Hua Mujin looked better with the bandages on. He then told him to go, ready to get this over with. The sound of steel scraping against leather echoed in the air as the sword slid into its scabbard. The metal was cold and unforgiving. The man asked if Hua Mujin was really going through with this. He then asked if he had come to spout the same nonsense about running away too, challenging his resolve. Hua Mujin looked down at the man with a confident smirk. He said that of course he wasn't there to spout nonsense. He added that he would be back after beating those thieves to a pulp. Elder Zhou looked determined. He announced that he was coming with Hua Mujin to the fight. Hua Mujin just looked up at him, surprised. Hua Mujin looked down, a smirk forming on his face. He thought that the old man worried too much. He was the one who would smash those thieves anyway, so the elder could relax. The doors to the training ground were now wide open, and a beam of sunlight pierced through the entrance. It was time to go. Hua Mujin stared at the open doorway, his expression unreadable. He seemed ready to face whatever was on the other side. Hua Mujin took the first step forward, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. He shouted that it was time to go, ready to face whatever awaited them. The words were written in bold strokes, announcing a martial duel. It was between the Changhua Merchant Company and the Yomhua family, a clash that everyone had been waiting for. The crowd went wild, everyone rushing to place their bets. A man shouted, urging them to hurry up and wager on who would win the duel. The man looked at the numbers, doing some quick math. He figured that the best anyone could hope for was half of half the payout, which actually sounded pretty decent. A man suggested that it might be smarter to bet on the Yomhua family, especially if they had a skilled martial artist. He decided to put 2 silver coins on the Yomhua family's young master. Suddenly, a man shouted that Yomhua family's young master Huagong had arrived. Everyone turned to look, surprised by his presence. Hua Mujin ate his candy without a care in the world. He looked calm, like he was about to go for a walk instead of a duel. Someone in the crowd got cold feet. He asked if he could cancel his bet on the Yomhua family, looking nervous. Hua Mujin arrived, casually eating a lollipop. Elder Zhou followed behind him, saying that drinking so much before a duel was not a good idea. A woman with a red umbrella appeared. She said it had been a long time since they last met, her tone laced with something like amusement. The woman asked if they really had to go through with the duel, saying it was for the sake of their blood ties. She seemed serious, but also resigned. The crowd was buzzing, whispering about the Yomhua family. Someone pointed out that the Yomhua family applied for the duel first. They were saying that doing something reckless, without the skill for it, meant the rumors were true. The speaker was furious. He said that it was like they were saying that they started this match on purpose. He added that he would have no choice but to return the favor. The speaker looked determined. He stated that they couldn't let Changhua Merchant Company take away the Yomhua family's secret art. He added that they had no option but to fight like this. The crowd was confused. Someone asked if they coveted the Yom family's secret art. He wondered why the Changhua Merchant Company would want it. He finished by saying he had no idea what was really going on. The speaker watched with a cold smile. She wondered how long that composure of the other person's would last. The brazier burned brightly, the flames dancing in the wind. The entire arena was silent, waiting for the duel to begin. A voice boomed across the training grounds, demanding everyone's attention. The crowd quieted down immediately, waiting for the announcement. The speaker announced that Han Ik-gang of the Gongdong clan would be the witness for this duel. Han Ik-gang stood tall, his expression serious. The speaker continued, introducing Chiang Dobo, the next head of the Changhua Merchant Company, and Hua Mujin, the young master of the Yeomhua family. Hua Mujin stared at the other man, his eyes narrowed. The speaker declared that under the name of the witnesses, the duel would be fought with fair and square honor. The crowd roared in approval, ready for the fight to begin. The man gestured grandly, asking if Hua Mujin had received the items they sent. He then asked what Hua Mujin was talking about. The speaker smiled, explaining that the outfit Hua Mujin was wearing was the Yomhua family's combat battle uniform. He added that he personally sent it to Commander Huan Mujin's glorious battle return. Hua Mujin simply replied, asking if that was so. The speaker declared that when this duel ended, Hua Mujin would have to return the rest of the valuables as well. Hua Mujin stared at his greatsword, ignoring the threat. Hua Mujin took a step forward, his boots echoing in the silent arena. The tension was building with every move he made. The crowd murmured amongst themselves, wondering if the owner of the Yomhua family was truly a sword master. They doubted anyone could wield swordsmanship with such a large blade. The crowd was buzzing, questioning why the Yomhua family was focusing on bare-handed techniques all of a sudden. They wondered if the bare-handed master Hyun-san would be using bare fists. A man asked Masoka if Hua Mujin had said anything special. Masoka admitted that when he suggested they run away that morning, Hua Mujin had gotten really angry. The man looked nervous, saying he was only joking about running away. He insisted that he actually believed Hua Mujin would win, no doubt about it. The man wondered if running might have been the better choice after all. He then said that Hua Mujin had changed, and he wondered if someone could really change that suddenly, or if madness was somehow contagious. A man with a staff shouted, asking if both sides were ready to begin. Hua Mujin lowered his stance. His eyes narrowed as he gripped his sword tightly. The opponent on the other side grinned and asked if he was ready. A voice boomed across the training grounds, declaring that the duel was about to begin. The crowd held its breath, waiting for the first move. Hua Mujin didn't waste any time. He launched himself forward, his sword aimed right at the opponent. Hua Mujin's eyes widened slightly. He wasn't expecting the opponent to be so skilled, so ready. The two swords met with a deafening clang, sending sparks flying everywhere. The power behind the blow was incredible, shaking the ground beneath them. The spectators couldn't believe what they were seeing. So fast, they shouted in disbelief, eyes wide. The clash of swords echoed through the training grounds as Hua Mujin met his opponent's strike head-on. Wasn't Hua Mujin supposed to be severely mad? One spectator wondered. I heard he hadn't even learned martial arts. Where on earth does that power come from? The swords continued to grind against each other. Still, it's the skill of an one-day pup, another spectator scoffed, trying to downplay Hua Mujin's sudden burst of power. The duel intensified, the air thick with tension. Sparks flew as Hua Mujin and his opponent traded blows, each strike carrying immense force. The impact of another sword clash sent shockwaves through the training grounds. Hua Mujin kept his eyes locked on his opponent, his resolve unwavering. The duel was a storm of steel, the sound of clashing swords ringing in the air. Each strike was met with equal force, neither fighter giving an inch. The spectators watched with amusement, some even laughing at the display. They clearly didn't think much of Hua Mujin's chances. One spectator, watching from under his umbrella, was starting to reconsider his earlier assumptions. He thought to himself that Hua Mujin was surprisingly enduring. Another observer, studying the fight with a critical eye, compared Hua Mujin's skills to those of Daboga. He thought that, compared to the martial arts that Daboga had built up until now, it was negligible. Hua Mujin swung his sword with renewed determination, ignoring the doubts of the spectators. He was going to prove them all wrong. The punch connected with a sickening thud. The force behind it was enough to shake the very ground. Hua Mujin was sent flying through the air like a leaf in a storm. He couldn't do anything to stop himself. The attacker stood tall, his sword gleaming in the light. He was ready for anything. He didn't waste a second. The attacker moved with blinding speed, his sword a blur of steel. Hua Mujin crashed into the ground, the impact stealing his breath. He was in serious trouble. The attacker stared down at Hua Mujin with pure hatred. He warned that he was going to leave Hua Mujin crippled this time. Crushing someone's will, he added, was what he did best. The attacker's eyes burned with cruel confidence. He finished his threat, shouting that crushing someone was the thing he did best. The two warriors collided, their swords meeting with a deafening crash. Sparks flew as the steel grinded against steel, each fighter trying to overpower the other. The attacker's strength was too much. Hua Mujin was sent flying backwards, struggling to regain his balance. The onlookers were starting to get interested in the fight. One of them commented that he thought Hua Mujin would have lost right away, but he was actually holding out pretty well. Another one chimed in, saying that he had secretly watched Hua Mujin training alone. The air crackled with energy, the ground trembling slightly. It felt like something truly massive and even more powerful was about to show up and change everything. Hua Mujin felt the force of the blow, and he knew he was in trouble. He thought to himself that from what he could tell, his level was about even with his opponent. Was that too much to expect in such a short time? Sweat dripped from Hua Mujin's face, and he tasted blood in his mouth, but he steeled himself, thinking that it didn't matter. Hua Mujin remembered his past. Regardless of whether the opponent was stronger than him in the past, when it came down to it, he finished them all. Hua Mujin focused his mind, so with this one, he was going to make sure he came out on top. Hua Mujin's face was a mask of fury, his eyes burning with a cold fire. He was just about to explode with anger. Hua Mujin was absolutely done playing around. He was going to kill that guy, no doubt about it. The directions were very specific. From the shabby hut, head east for 5 kilometers, then turn when you see the hawthorn tree. After that, it was another 3 kilometers to wherever they were going. The carriage moved quickly, the wheels kicking up dust as it sped down the road. Leaves swirled around them, pushed by a strong wind. The man said he had finally arrived. He was relieved that the 2 kids with him were asleep, which made it easier to bring them along. The man asked if the other person really wasn't coming with him. He pointed out that the dead person was still a blood relative, and someone needed to gather his remains. The other man replied that he would personally oversee the last journey of young Master Hua. After that, he would meet them at the promised location. The man sighed, looking up at the sky. Turns out, he wasn't sure if he was doing the right thing at all. The clash of swords echoed through the training grounds. Sparks flew as the 2 fighters traded blows, neither giving an inch. The observer watched the fight intently. He thought that Chang Dobo was pretty good for someone his age, but in the end, he was only at the level of a sword demon. The 2 fighters collided with incredible force. The impact sent shockwaves through the air. The crowd watched with bated breath, the tension thick in the air. They were all waiting to see who would win. The crowd was watching the duel between Hua Mujin and Chang. One of them commented that young Master Hua seemed to have the upper hand. Apparently, the second moon of the Celestial Merchant Guild wasn't all that impressive. Chang's face was covered in sweat and blood. He was breathing heavily, starting to struggle against Hua Mujin. Hua Mujin's sword slammed into Chang, sending him flying backwards. The force of the blow shook the ground. The crowd gasped, realizing what was about to happen. Some of them yelled at young Master Hua to dodge. Hua Mujin wasn't listening to the crowd. He was completely focused, using the Peerless 9 Swords first form, preemptive step. The swords slammed together, sending sparks flying in every direction. The force of the impact alone was enough to make your skin crawl. The crowd watching the fight gasped all at once, their eyes wide with disbelief. The air was thick with anticipation. Chang couldn't believe what he was seeing. He shouted, asking how Hua Mujin had blocked that. Hua Mujin didn't give Chang a chance to recover. He deflected the attack with a powerful move, turning the tables in an instant. Chang was furious, spitting out blood. He cursed, calling him a mad bastard. The swords collided with a deafening crash, blue energy exploding outwards with incredible force. The air crackled, and the ground trembled from the sheer power of the strike. The crowd watched with bated breath as young Master Chiang gathered all of his inner energy. They knew this was it, his last chance to turn the tide. The audience agreed that this had to be Chang's final strike. The air was thick with anticipation, everyone waiting to see if he could pull off a miracle. Hua Mujin moved like lightning, taunting Chiang for his slowness. He told him that even his gathering of inner energy was too slow to matter. Hua Mujin unleashed the Peerless 9 Swords second form, weapon destruction. The power behind the strike was terrifying, promising to tear apart anything in its path. The 2 swords met in a burst of raw power, each warrior fighting for control. Sparks flew as the blades struggled against each other, neither giving an inch. Chang was on the ground, covered in blood, as he realized he was losing. He couldn't believe he was so helpless against Hua Mujin's attacks. Hua Mujin stood over Chang, his sword raised high above his head, ready to end the fight. He was about to win. Chang was furious. He couldn't believe he was losing to Hua Mujin, someone who didn't even have an energy core. He thought, am I really losing to this energy coreless bastard? Suddenly, the sword shattered into pieces, the broken shards falling to the ground. The weapon had been destroyed. Hua Mujin attacked with incredible speed, his sword cutting through the air. The force behind the strike was enough to make the air itself scream. Chang's face twisted in pain as he felt the impact. He couldn't believe what was happening, asking himself what the hell just happened. Hua Mujin didn't give Chang a chance to recover. He followed through with another powerful swing, pushing his advantage. Hua Mujin was relentless, his sword a blur as he came down on Chang. Another strike landed, the force of it shaking the entire arena. Chang lay defeated on the ground, the fight completely knocked out of him. It was over. Dobo's voice echoed through the arena as he called out. The crowd looked up, surprised by his sudden shout. Someone in the audience stammered in disbelief, asking how young Master Hua could have won. Chang lay defeated on the ground, completely still. Hua Mujin stepped down hard, his foot crushing Chang's arm. The sound of bones cracking echoed through the arena. Hua Mujin stared down at Chang, his voice cold as ice. He warned that he would take the arm as payment for a 17-year-old grudge. Chang looked up, his face pale with shock. He stammered, asking what Hua Mujin had just said. Hua Mujin looked down at Chang with a cold expression. He remarked that since it was the Changhua Merchant Guild, maybe they could find a way to reattach the arm. Hua Mujin turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing through the arena. Each step seemed to carry the weight of his victory and the finality of his actions. Chang lay on the ground, broken and defeated. The arena was silent except for his ragged breathing, a testament to the brutal end of the duel. Someone in the crowd pointed out that Chang's energy core was shattered as well. Hua Mujin just shrugged, acting like he didn't go too far. The other person argued that there was a clear skill gap and the match was decided long ago. But then another person fired back, asking if it was really necessary to use the 7 wounds fist strike on the head of a 5-year-old kid who knew no martial arts. Hua Mujin's eyes glowed red with fury as he spoke. He declared that this was merely the end of a 17-year-old grudge, and from now on, they would pay the price for provoking the Flame Hua clan. The air crackled with tension as Hua Mujin delivered a final warning. He told them to prepare themselves well, hinting at the storm that was about to break. Hua Mujin turned his back, sheathing his sword with a metallic click. He walked away, leaving the defeated Chang and the stunned onlookers behind. Tears streamed down the person's face as they trembled with rage. They screamed that they would never forget what Hua Mujin had done. The crowd gasped, their faces a mix of shock and fear. The air was thick with disbelief as the weight of Hua Mujin's actions settled upon them. Hua Mujin stood tall, his sword gleaming under the arena lights. The crowd watched in stunned silence, unsure of what they had just witnessed. The onlookers couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. One of them said that he crushed an outer sect disciple of the Kongdong sect in just a few moves, and that it was a sword art they'd never seen before. The crowd erupted in cheers, hailing Hua Mujin as a new martial master. They chanted his name, their voices filled with excitement and disbelief. One of the men suggested they head back. The other one agreed, still stunned by what he had just seen. Hua Mujin turned and walked away, his back to the crowd. One of the men commented that he didn't remember Hua Mujin's back being so broad. Chief Steward Do shouted, replying with a nervous, "Yes?" He was clearly on edge. The Chief Steward Do wondered if Hua Mujin had already noticed they were planning to run away. He was getting a bad feeling about this. Hua Mujin asked with a smile about the gold he had entrusted to them. He didn't seem angry, but his eyes were cold. Chief Steward Do laughed nervously, saying that of course he hadn't spent it all. He added that he'd have to stop by the bank soon because of some money issues. Chief Steward Do suddenly said that there was one more thing he needed to mention. He looked like he was trying to avoid something. Hua Mujin said he didn't really care if Elder Zhou and the other warriors left the clan, but he warned that if anyone ever tried to split him apart from his 2 younger siblings, they'd have to pay with their lives. Hua Mujin's face darkened, his eyes promising a brutal response. The threat hung heavy in the air. Hours later, the sun began to set, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple. Little brother shouted, upset that it was his brother's duel day. He said he couldn't forgive whoever did this, but then he paused, saying he should probably read the message that came with the messenger pigeon first. "Oh dear," little brother said. said, clearly worried. Little sister tugged on his hair, equally concerned about what the message said. The message was clear. We're screwed. Will worry young Master Hua escape plan is discovered. Return immediately. It was a bad situation. So, since they were on the topic of money, Hua Mujin figured it was time for a debt party. He explained that a debt party is when someone can't pay their debts, so they hand over everything they have to settle them. Hua Mujin clarified that he wasn't talking about any old debt party. He was talking about those bastards from the Bango sect. He thought it was about time he dealt with them. Hua Mujin told Chief Steward Do to rest, saying he'd take care of everything himself. But Chief Steward Do was still worried. He said that even though the martial arts duel proved that Hua Mujin was different now, he still worried too much. Hua Mujin told him not to get tangled up with the Bango sect in any way. Then, Hua Mujin announced that he was heading out. Chief Steward Do just watched him go, looking concerned. The other man asked if Hua Mujin was really heading straight for the Bango sect, like this. Hua Mujin confirmed that he was, saying it was best not to delay troublesome business. Hua Mujin ordered Ma Sok to stay close behind him from now on. Ma Sok nervously agreed, but he was clearly confused, wondering why Hua Mujin was calling him Big Boss. They arrived at a large building, the sign above the entrance clearly stating, Usury Business Bangho Sect. It looked like they were finally at the Bangho Sect's headquarters. A man in a wide-brimmed hat stepped forward, looking surprised. He said he never thought he'd see Hua Mujin again in this lifetime. Hua Mujin replied that he'd come to pay back his debts, reminding the man that he was the one who had crippled that vicious Jungsun from the Zhonghua merchant group. He added that it was a quiet place and asked if their business had gone under. The man nervously explained that it wasn't exactly that their business had gone under. He said that most of the gamblers in Xichang had gone to watch Hua Mujin's duel. Hua Mujin realized that everyone had gone to see him fight. Hua Mujin stared at the man with the wide-brimmed hat, asking if they all must have held betting pools on his match. He looked absolutely serious, like he already knew the answer. The man quickly apologized, saying they meant no disrespect. He stammered that he was sure the odds were higher on Hua Mujin's side, hinting that they made a tidy sum from it. The man looked down, sweat dripping from his face. He mumbled, "Yes, sir," clearly nervous about what Hua Mujin was going to say next. Hua Mujin pressed him, saying they must have made good money thanks to him. He asked if they were planning to just stay silent about it, adding, "Damn it, planning to screw us again?" The man quickly assured him that wasn't the case, saying that they were going to properly express their gratitude. Hua Mujin seemed satisfied, saying, "Good, that's what I like to hear." The men could tell that Hua Mujin was completely different than before. The air around him was cold, like a martial master filled with killing intent. Hua Mujin asked where their boss was hiding. He warned that he didn't like having to ask twice. Hua Mujin took a step forward, saying that if they weren't gonna talk, he'd just have to make them. Hua Mujin stared at the man with the octopus head, asking if he was the boss. He said his boys told him about him, and asked why he had to make it so hard for someone who just wanted a word. Hua Mujin added that it wasn't like he had a pretty face to begin with. Hua Mujin then pointed out a brat standing behind the boss, calling him one of his lackeys. The Death Black Crow sneered, saying Hua Mujin had quite the mouth for a kid. He pointed out that Hua Mujin was from the Social sect, and asked if he was the one keeping his money. Hua Mujin scoffed, asking if this guy was from the Social sect. He questioned who told him to speak when adults were talking, and asked if he wanted a death wish before laughing. The Death Black Crow didn't hesitate. He jumped forward, yelling at Hua Mujin to go ahead and try to kill him then. One of the men shouted a warning to Hua Mujin. He yelled that Social sect or not, anyone who stood in Hua Mujin's way. Hua Mujin's sword flashed, piercing right through the guy. He finished the sentence, declaring that anyone who stood in his way gets a hole put through them. The swordsman fell backwards, his head splitting open from the force of the blow. Blood splattered on the ground as he crashed to the floor. Hua Mujin stood tall, his sword still dripping with blood. The speed of his attack was so fast, the swordsman didn't even see it coming. The Death Black Crow stared, his eyes wide. He thought to himself that he thought Hua Mujin was just some brat, but now he realized he's no ordinary man. The Death Black Crow looked at his hand, which was pierced by chopsticks. He remarked that Hua Mujin pierced his hand with chopsticks, no less, and called him an interesting little bastard. Hua Mujin scoffed, saying he felt nothing hearing that from a wrinkled old man like him. The Death Black Crow launched himself forward, his body surrounded by dark energy. He yelled at Hua Mujin not to get cocky. The Death Black Crow came crashing down with a powerful kick. The force of the blow cracked the ground beneath Hua Mujin. The Death Black Crow was furious. He demanded to know where Hua Mujin Mujin was looking. Hua Mujin dodged the attack at the last second, surrounded by a strange energy. The Death Black Crow's foot slammed into empty air. The Death Black Crow was stunned. He couldn't believe how some young punk could dodge his attack so easily. He was starting to get worried. Hua Mujin was right behind him, ready to strike. He grinned, saying he was going to open up one more hole in the guy. The air was thick with tension. The two men screamed at each other, their faces contorted with rage and fear. Hua Mujin stood over the guy, asking if he was enjoying the breeze. The guy spat out blood, cursing Hua Mujin for attacking them, warning that the sect would come for him. The fallen man, his face covered in blood, threatened that Hua Mujin's family and friends wouldn't be safe either. Hua Mujin scoffed, telling the guy to send the social sect after him if they were so tough. He added that the guy was gonna die right there. The guy begged him to wait. The guy started begging, offering his wealth, even his concubines, if Hua Mujin would just spare him. Hua Mujin looked at the guy with disgust, asking if he suddenly wanted to live. Hua Mujin was breathing hard, telling the man that he didn't need his concubines, but that wealth he mentioned did interest him. The man, his face covered in blood, promised that it was all in Dechang. He swore he'd bring everything back. Hua Mujin replied that was the right attitude, but if he didn't return, Hua Mujin warned that he'd be breathing through the holes in his face instead. The man quickly agreed that he'd be right back. Hua Mujin paused for a moment. Now then, Hua Mujin looked down at the others, his eyes cold. He asked if they should continue settling this debt. One of the men fell to the ground, begging Hua Mujin to spare him too. He was clearly terrified of what was about to happen. The man promised that he'd give Hua Mujin everything he owned if he spared him. His face was covered in sweat as he pleaded for his life. Hua Mujin looked down at the man with cold eyes. He told him that that was nonsense, since his property was already his. The man stammered, asking what he meant. Hua Mujin explained that the profits he'd wrung out of the commoners were 7,000 gold nyang. He added the price of all the lives he'd ruined by manipulating the martial clans. Wouldn't that just about equal all his assets? The man stammered that he'd give Hua Mujin everything, including. The man's eyes were wide with shock, a dark hole piercing his forehead. Hua Mujin asked him if he didn't understand plain speech, his voice dripping with disdain. Hua Mujin stood over the body, looking down with a cold expression. He asked why the guy kept offering what was already his, like he was too dumb to understand the situation. The remaining men watched with wide eyes, realizing they were next. The air was thick with fear, and nobody dared to move. One of the men, desperate to save himself, asked who was next in command after the dead guy. He stammered that he was the vice sect leader. Hua Mujin replied, surprised that he hadn't been expecting that. The vice sect leader begged Hua Mujin to spare him. He swore he'd live honestly if he got another chance, his voice cracking with desperation. Hua Mujin stared down at the vice sect leader. He told him that he could live, deciding to spare him for now. Hua Mujin then asked how much the dead man's property was worth, including his house, brothel, and cash. The vice sect leader reported that it all amounted to 4,000 gold nyang. Hua Mujin also wanted to know about the Bangho sect's total assets, including all establishments, which the man said were at least 10,000 gold nyang, plus a 500 gold nyang tribute to the social sect. Hua Mujin looked at the numbers. He noted that the Bangho sect leader had 4,000 gold nyang, and all business profits would naturally come to him. He added the Bangho sect's total assets of 10,000 gold nyang, the tribute to Sosol of 500 gold nyang, and compensation for their emotional damage, totaling about 20,000 gold nyang. He declared that this sounded fair. The vice sect leader stammered that he would prepare the transfer documents and bring them right away. Hua Mujin agreed, telling him to handle all documents and gold right there. The vice sect leader replied with a fearful, "Yes, sir." Hua Mujin paused, a dark glint in his eyes. He asked if they should start negotiating the ransom prices for the rest of them. The remaining men looked on, terrified. Hua Mujin told them he'd spared the leader, but he never said he'd spare the rest of them. The remaining members of the Bangho sect begged him to spare their lives. The man screamed, his face contorted with pure terror. It was a sound that echoed through the room, full of dread. Just then, a man walked in, looking surprised by the scene. He said he'd just gotten back from the debt party, clearly confused by the situation. The man explained that each chest held about 400 gold nyang. He confirmed that he was speaking to young Master Hua. The man asked Hua Mujin if he remembered who was backing the Bangho sect. He reminded Hua Mujin that he himself had said it was the social sect. Then he wanted to know if Hua Mujin knew who was allied with them. Chief Do scoffed, asking why he should care about the social sect. He then revealed that Ju Sugang of the Crimson Sword sect was sworn brothers with the Death Black Crow and Red Crow of the social sect. Hua Mujin asked if the Death Black Crow was the guy with the pitch black fingers. He then casually mentioned that he had stuck chopsticks in the guy's eyeballs, which shocked Chief Do. Hua Mujin told Chief Do that the Death Black Crow might be too much for him or Elder Joe to handle, but Hua Mujin warned that Chief Do shouldn't hold him to his standards, because if trouble like that came looking for him, he'd just kill them all. Simple as that. Hua Mujin changed the subject, telling Chief Do to get him some tender beef for dinner. He also told him to make sure his siblings were fed when they returned, before turning to head inside. Chief Do watched Hua Mujin walk away, thinking about how the Death Black Crow was feared even across Sichuan. He wondered how Hua Mujin didn't think much of such a man. He then thought about the incident during the duel, wondering if this was really the same young Master Hua he once knew. The Flame Hua clan estate was quiet that night. The wind whispered through the eaves of the buildings, carrying the scent of pine and the promise of a storm. The merchant group leader was overseeing an ambush on the Flame Hua clan. He scoffed at the other person, saying that he must have been baffled by the customs of the duel. He added that the other person was just someone who's hired to do the job, so why so talkative? The woman coldly ordered them to bring back only one child alive. She said they could kill the rest if they wanted. Her face was stone cold. The person was reminded that one child must not die. He chuckled and said that he understood, and that they'd be back before sunrise. The whole thing was creepy. Hua Mujin's face was filled with fury as he vowed to tear apart everything they held dear right before their eyes. His anger was burning like a wildfire. The wind howled through the mountains, carrying the red flag high. The man stood firm, a silent promise to protect his clan, no matter what the cost. Turns out, the Yomhua clan once had its own era of glory. Countless martial artists, all drawn to the remarkable Yomje, filled the training grounds. Even the prestigious Tong clan of Sichuan highly praised Yomje's character and skill. In just one generation, things changed for the better. The Yomhua clan established itself as a martial family that no one could ignore. They were at the top of their game. Even renowned masters couldn't carelessly touch the warriors of the Yomhua clan. It was a time when all the residents would cheer enthusiastically whenever they walked the streets of Sochang. But after the death of Yomje, things went downhill fast. The succession ceremony for the next clan head went ahead, but the new leader was clearly not up to the task. The incompetence of the new head was plain for everyone to see. The Yomhua clan started to fall apart. Even those who had promised to be loyal started turning away, one after another. It was a slow bleed, but it was definitely happening. It was all a far cry from the image of Yomje, the leader who once commanded the whole world. He was a legend in his own time, and now, to those who were on the side of justice, Yomje was a generous hero. But to his enemies, he was an unbeatable master. He was truly a hero for the ages, no doubt about it. But why was it that the speaker saw the image of Yomje mixed with young Master Hua's back as he walked away? It didn't make any sense. The guard was screaming, calling for the head steward. He asked where the young master and young lady were, his voice cracking with fear. He realized that there were too many assassins from the heavenly demon cult. The guards reported that Elder Joe and the warriors had somehow made it back, but it wasn't enough. There were just too many assassins, and the young lord and young lady were in serious danger. The guard shouted for someone to inform young Master Hua Mujin immediately. He said he was going on ahead, and the other guard agreed. Far from the estate, the fight was happening in a bamboo forest. The assassins were closing in. Hua Mujin looked at the remaining assassins, holding the little brother close. He told them that he wasn't going to kill all of them, so they should think carefully about what they were going to do next. The assassin sneered, warning Hua Mujin that he could lose the kids if he tried anything stupid. The assassin seemed to be enjoying this way too much, like it was all a game to him. He was a real piece of trash. The fight was chaotic, a whirlwind of blades and bodies, moving too fast to follow. There were just so many of the assassins, swarming like angry bees. The assassin was ready to strike, his eyes narrowed behind the mask. He was completely focused on his target, not even a flicker of doubt in his expression. Hua Mujin's voice cut through the noise, telling them to back off quietly. He looked completely calm, like he was just dealing with some annoying flies. Another assassin showed up, shouting for them to kill Hua Mujin. They were starting to get desperate, like they knew things weren't going their way. The fight was a blur of motion, blades flashing and bodies colliding. Hua Mujin moved with incredible speed, deflecting each attack with a strength that seemed impossible. The The assassin swung his sword, sneering that they only sent a decrepit old fossil. He seemed way too confident, like he thought this fight was already won. Elder Joe shouted for him to be careful, his face twisted with worry. He knew something was up, that this fight was far from over. Hua Mujin struck the assassin, sending him flying backwards. The force of the blow echoed through the air, leaving no doubt who was in charge. The assassin crashed to the ground, defeated. He was probably regretting his cocky attitude now, realizing he messed with the wrong guy. The assassin realized he was outmatched and shouted in frustration. He couldn't believe how fast Hua Mujin was, the blade moving faster than he could follow. The assassin's face was slashed open, blood spraying everywhere. He felt a sharp pain and realized he was in serious trouble. Another assassin yelled that they should handle this side, ordering his comrades to leave one kid alive and kill the rest. He was clearly enjoying this, the scumbag. The assassin raised his sword, declaring that it was time to die. He looked absolutely ruthless, ready to end someone's life without a second thought. A final scream echoed through the air as someone realized this was really the end. The attack landed and everything went silent. The assassin laughed, clearly enjoying the situation. He was having a blast, feeling no regret at all about his horrible mission. The assassin looked down at the two kids, trying to decide which one to kill and which one to take. He wondered which one would be more useful to his boss. The little sister looked up, fear in her eyes. She stammered for her brother, scared about what was going to happen. The little brother stepped forward, shouting that if someone had to die, it should be him. He wasn't going to let his sister get hurt. Suddenly, a surge of power erupted. Hua Mujin's face glowed, and the air crackled with energy. Everyone was stunned by the sudden eruption of power. The assassin and the two kids looked at each other with wide eyes, trying to figure out what was going on. The assassin looked up, his eyes widening as he recognized the man standing before him. He shouted, "That guy is the mad demon, Hua Mujin!" The assassin said that it shouldn't matter if they killed Hua Mujin too. If he got in the way of their mission, they had to take him out. The assassin lunged forward, swinging his sword at Hua Mujin. He yelled that Hua Mujin had a death wish. Hua Mujin stared at the assassin, his face full of rage. He wasn't going to let this scumbag get away with threatening his family. Hua Mujin launched a flurry of attacks, blades flying everywhere. The assassin raised his swords to block, barely managing to keep up with the speed. The two men stood face to face, the air crackling with tension. They were both waiting for the other to make the first move, ready to strike at any moment. The assassin looked completely baffled. He muttered, "Huh?" Hua Mujin unleashed a devastating sword technique, the force of it creating a shockwave. The assassin shouted, "What the hell is that?" The other assassins realized how dangerous Hua Mujin was and started to panic. They yelled, "Everyone, attack! Kill him!" Hua Mujin didn't hesitate. He unleashed the solitary nine swords technique, a whirlwind of deadly force ready to tear through anything. You could feel the energy building up around him. The fifth form of the sword technique erupted around Hua Mujin, creating a vortex of red energy. The assassins were trapped in the storm of blades. The technique hit with full force. Hua Mujin stared at the assassin, his eyes filled with rage. As the assassin looked back, completely shocked, the assassin screamed as the blades tore through him. Hua Mujin stood over him, showing no mercy. Hua Mujin stood there, covered in blood, as the assassin fell to the ground. The fight was over. The assassin realized he was facing a monster, not a man. He was done for. Hua Mujin stood there, his sword dripping with blood. The assassins were all dead. Hua Mujin looked down at someone, his face grim. He warned them not to even twitch if they wanted to live. Hua Mujin stood protectively in front of the children, a wall between them and the carnage. He was going to make sure they were safe, no matter what. The little sister looked up, confused. She asked if he was her brother. The little sister covered her eyes, telling Hua Mujin not to look. She asked if her brother had gotten rid of all the bad guys. Hua Mujin confirmed that he had, which was why she shouldn't look. Hua Mujin held the little sister close, asking if she was okay. The little sister stammered, saying that she was fine. Hua Mujin told the little brother that he must have been scared. The little brother puffed out his chest, denying it completely. He declared that he wasn't scared at all because he was a son of a martial family. Hua Mujin looked down at the little brother, giving a small smile. He told him that he did well. Hua Mujin turned to Elder Joe, ordering him to take the injured warriors and the children back to the estate. Elder Joe bowed his head, agreeing right away. He told everyone to hurry to the infirmary. Hua Mujin looked down at the lost arm, then asked how long the guy was going to want whine about losing just one arm. He clearly wasn't sympathetic. Hua Mujin glared down at the assassin and asked if that woman from the Changhua Merchant Guild had sent him. He looked absolutely furious. Hua Mujin stood over the injured assassin, his sword gleaming in the moonlight. He told him to answer properly, and maybe he'd let him live. The assassin stammered, asking if Hua Mujin would really let him live. He quickly added that Hua Mujin shouldn't make him repeat himself, because he could wipe them all out. The assassin admitted that he was right. He said that the head of the Changhua Merchant Guild, Bu Choyeon, had hired them through the Sarambang. The assassin asked if Hua Mujin was really going to spare him. He was clearly scared. Hua Mujin told him that if he didn't want to die, he should run back and tell that woman something. Hua Mujin stood over the bodies of the fallen assassins, his eyes burning with rage. He told the guy to tell that scumbag how Hua Mujin of the Yomhua clan had slaughtered her people and how he was going to kill them all from now on. A few people noticed Hua Mujin walking toward them, and one of them pointed out the blood covering him. Another asked who it could be, answering that it was the lunatic from the Flame Hua clan. The guy wondered if his madness had gone away, but decided that it looked even worse. Anyone who saw Hua Mujin walking down the road, covered in blood from head to toe, couldn't laugh at him anymore. They couldn't look down on him either. Not anymore. One of the people mentioned that Hua Mujin had taken down Bangho sect all by himself. Another person was shocked, calling them vicious bastards. Someone else added that he had even left the second son of the Changhua Merchant Guild half paralyzed. One of them recalled that people once called Hua Mujin the mad young master. He thought it was strange, remembering that when Hua Mujin was a kid, they had called him a prodigy blessed by the heavens. He wondered if that talent was returning, now that they were calling him the hidden dragon of the Sichang. Hua Mujin just kept walking, leaving the gossiping crowd behind him. He had a mission to complete, and he wasn't going to let their opinions slow him down. One of Hua Mujin's men came running, shouting, "Young master!" The man sighed in relief. "Thank goodness. You're walking on your own. Are you hurt anywhere?" Hua Mujin waved him off, saying he was fine. He asked if everyone was in the medicine hall. The man confirmed. Yes, not a single one escaped injury. The second young master and Lady Goyon are resting in their rooms to regain their strength. Hua Mujin nodded, satisfied. "Well done. Prepare a bath for me right away." The man agreed immediately. Night had fallen over the estate. The building stood silent under the moonlight. Hua Mujin sank into the hot water, letting the heat soothe his aching muscles. He let out a long breath, finally able to relax for a moment. Hua Mujin muttered to himself about the second young master and Lady Goyon needing to rest to regain their strength. It was something unthinkable for the children of a martial clan. Hua Mujin didn't want those two to see the cruelty of the world just yet. If he could, he'd rather let them live, seeing only good things. Hua Mujin stared at the orb, wondering if he was protecting someone else onto those kids. He was starting to get protective. Hua Mujin repeated the thought in his head, reinforcing his decision. He was going to make sure they were safe. Hua Mujin leaned back in the bath, looking out the window. The moonlight cast long shadows across the room as he thought about the future. The next day, the air in the medicine hall was thick with anticipation. Someone asked, stuttering, about the Red Flame art manual. Hua Mujin confirmed that it was indeed the Red Flame art manual he was asking about. He wondered why the other person was so startled. He asked if he had asked for something he shouldn't have. The man with the beard looked at Hua Mujin suspiciously, asking for the reason why he was asking for it. Hua Mujin looked absolutely furious. He wondered if the man was worried he'd relapse and tear it apart in another fit. He quickly denied that was the reason. Hua Mujin declared that the man couldn't possibly teach his clan's secret techniques right now. So, starting tomorrow, he would personally train the two of them. Elder Ju sighed, and judging by his face, he clearly doubted Hua Mujin. He quickly denied it, though. Elder Ju said that there was no need to worry and that nothing would happen. He handed over the Red Flame art manual, understanding the situation. Hua Mujin said goodbye and asked the man to rest well. Elder Ju asked him to please take care. Elder Ju sighed, wondering if this would really be okay. The other man told him not to worry so much. He reminded him that he'd seen Hua Mujin's astonishing swordsmanship. The man continued that Hua Mujin's fits had stopped recently, and he was clearly improving. Honestly, it looked like he was almost cured. He figured it must be that the specialist treatment was finally working. Hua Mujin thought that this wasn't just any ordinary encounter. It had to have been with a powerful martial master. There was no other explanation. He felt like the 17-year shadow cast over the Flame Hua clan seemed to finally be lifting. At the Flame Hua clan training ground, Hua Mujin began to explain the butterfly dance. The little brother asked what the bee buzz meant, since he didn't understand. Hua Mujin told them that it meant to face your opponent as if freezing their feet in place, while your own movement remained as free as a butterfly's. He looked at them with pride, hoping they would understand. Hua Mujin said that it was a fundamental movement technique he created himself based on countless real combat experiences. The little sister looked surprised and said that Elder Ju said he barely had any real combat experience. Hua Mujin panicked and told her not to say that out loud. Hua Mujin cleared his throat and said that there was enough theory and that it was time to move to actual sparring. He told both of them to attack him with the most basic technique they learned. The little brother looked excited and said he was coming. The little sister screamed as she tried to strike. She was putting everything she had into the attack. Hua Mujin didn't even seem to be trying as he blocked both children's attacks. He barely moved, but his defense was perfect. Hua Mujin was starting to get annoyed. He wondered what the hell they were doing and if they were really from a martial clan. He thought that maybe they were just too young. Hua Mujin thought that this was absurd. They didn't know how to balance their weight or rotate from the lower body. They couldn't even manage to do the basics of body control. Hua Mujin shouted for them to stop. He was clearly not happy with their progress. Hua Mujin suddenly stopped, holding his head. He said he had a headache and that they should stop for the day. He asked if they were all right, even though he hadn't hit their heads. Hua Mujin told them that their skills were much better than he had expected. He said that they needed to strengthen their basics before learning any advanced moves. He told them to go rest and that he would see them both at dinner. Hua Mujin sighed, watching them leave. He knew this wasn't going to be easy. He had a long road ahead of him to get them up to speed. Suddenly, someone spoke up, calling him master. The speaker said that Hua Mujin must have had a hard time himself. Hua Mujin apologized, saying that because of him, the clan's martial lineage was lost. He vowed to restore their ruined clan to its former glory and revive the clan's martial legacy. Hua Mujin was going to find that scumbag, the one who bore that cursed swordless mark, the one he couldn't defeat in his previous life. He was dead set on finding him. Hua Mujin's eyes narrowed, and he said he was going to kill him, no matter what it took. His face was set in stone. He wouldn't be stopped. Hua Mujin stared at his hand, frustrated that he couldn't even lift it, but he could feel it. The energy in the air was changing. Hua Mujin started practicing his sword forms, and he could feel his speed increasing with every move. The red energy around him intensified. Hua Mujin leaped into the air, the sword a mere extension of his will. He was determined to master these skills, no matter the cost. A few days passed. Then one of the men announced that he had returned. It was obvious that he had been gone for a while. Hua Mujin simply said it was good work. He didn't seem overly impressed. The guy was furious. He asked if all Hua Mujin had to say was good work after everything they'd gone through to protect the second young master and Lady Soyeon. He wanted to know who told Hua Mujin to pull that garbage in the first place. Hua Mujin stared down at the man, warning that if he had arrived even a little later, they'd all be dead. He threatened that if they ever pulled something like that again, he'd make sure to kill them himself. The man apologized immediately, stammering. Another man commented that Hua Mujin was definitely getting better. He said that he was the only one who could treat the young master, and that with just a few more sessions, Hua Mujin would be fully cured. The guards saw the approaching figure, and one of them asked who it was, saying they didn't have any food for beggars. But another one of the men quickly corrected him, pointing out that it was Sir Taoist, the same man who had treated them. The man apologized deeply to Sir Taoist, explaining that the young lord hadn't fully recovered yet. He then cleared his throat and shoved another man out of the way, trying to make amends for the rude behavior. The man realized how rude he had been and apologized, explaining that he hadn't recognized Sir Taoist at first. He looked genuinely embarrassed by his mistake. Sir Taoist smiled slightly, saying that they must be hungry after their long journey. He politely asked them to come inside first, trying to ease the awkwardness. A few days before, the man recalled that the Taoist had inherited the Taoist lineage of the Wudong sect. He also remembered that the chief steward had paid a hefty sum to invite the Taoist, who was famous for his miraculous martial arts and positive energy healing. Hua Mujin looked at the Taoist and said, "So this is the man? Please, come in." He cleared his throat, signaling for the Taoist to enter. The chief steward bowed deeply to the Taoist, showing his respect. He seemed eager to please the man who had been invited at such a high price. The chief steward looked at the Taoist suspiciously, asking if he had really inherited the Wudong sect's Taoist lineage. He seemed to be testing the Taoist's claims. The Taoist stammered for a moment, then declared that he was the only Taoist to inherit the true essence of the Wudong sect. He boldly proclaimed, "I am the Wudong White Immortal." Hua Mujin looked down at the Taoist with a smirk, saying, "So you claim to be the Wudong White Immortal? How strange. I've never heard of any successor of Wudong's Taoist lineage surviving." The Taoist stammered, looking up at Hua Mujin. He tried to defend himself, saying that it was nonsense and he was the real deal. He told Hua Mujin to listen to him and tell him the truth while he still could, because he wouldn't be able to turn back later. Hua Mujin looked at the Taoist with a skeptical expression. He asked what the Taoist was saying and if he was doubting him. Hua Mujin told him to go on and keep talking, and he'd try to believe him for real. Hua Mujin drew his sword and prepared to strike the Taoist. He said that if the Taoist was truly a disciple of the Wudong sect, dodging the sword should be a piece of cake. He moved fast. The Taoist screamed as Hua Mujin's sword came closer. He couldn't dodge it. He was terrified. The chief steward started yelling, asking what Hua Mujin was doing and demanding that someone stop him. He questioned why the young master was treating the grand man before him that way, but Hua Mujin cut him off immediately. He told the chief steward to shut up and go fetch a bucket of water quickly, because he was going to show everyone something funny. Hua Mujin didn't even wait. He poured the water on the Taoist's head, soaking him completely. The Taoist just groaned in shock, not expecting that at all. The Taoist looked absolutely furious. He shouted, asking what this madness was. He demanded to know if the Flame Hua clan repaid kindness by humiliating their savior. Hua Mujin didn't say a word. He reached out and grabbed something on the Taoist's face, pulling hard. Turns out it was a fake beard. The chief steward and the others stared in disbelief. The chief steward stammered, realizing that the Taoist was a fraud. Hua Mujin stared down at the Taoist, a sinister smile spreading across his face. He pointed out that the guy had even glued the beard on carefully before calling him a filthy fraud. Hua Mujin looked absolutely furious. He couldn't believe he'd actually fallen for the scam, and he let the Taoist know that he had insides trying to swindle him of all people. The chief steward asked Hua Mujin what he was going to do with the guy. Hua Mujin suggested cutting off his limbs and turning him into an eunuch, his eyes burning with anger. Hua Mujin said he wasn't going to kill the Taoist, because if he died, how would he get his money back? The Taoist started begging, saying he'd return all the money he swindled if Hua Mujin would just spare his arms and legs. Hua Mujin said that was a given, but he was also going to charge the Taoist for his useless limbs and manhood. The Taoist begged for anything but that, saying he'd pay any amount Hua Mujin asked for. Hua Mujin asked the chief steward how much the Taoist had scammed from him. When he heard it was 50 gold nyang, Hua Mujin couldn't believe it. He asked what the chief steward had been doing all these years to get conned that badly. The chief steward tried to explain that he'd heard the Taoist was a great healer, but Hua Mujin cut him off. He shouted that he'd heard enough and didn't want to listen to any more of it. He looked absolutely furious. Hua Mujin told the Taoist that he heard him and he should start with the 50 gold nyang. The Taoist stammered, saying the money wasn't there right now and they'd have to go to his residence in Jinyan. When Hua Mujin heard it was 4 hours away, he told the Taoist to lead the way. The chief steward asked if they should come along, but Hua Mujin told them not to bother. He asked what they would even do with their weak bodies and if they wanted him to clean up their corpses too. Hua Mujin told them to stay home and not cause trouble. The chief steward looked down, feeling useless. Hua Mujin ordered the scammer to move it and lead the way. The Taoist stammered, agreeing immediately. Meanwhile, the chief steward watched him go, worried. He muttered that the young master was no longer the man he used to be. Hua Mujin ran after the Taoist, his cloak billowing behind him. He was dead set on getting that money back, no matter what it took. Hua Mujin followed the Taoist out of the city. People moved out of their way, whispering and watching them go. They walked further, leaving the city behind. The houses became smaller and fewer until there was nothing but fields and the road ahead. Hua Mujin clicked his tongue, getting annoyed. He thought he should have brought a horse. There wasn't a single beast in this trash place. The Taoist pointed toward a fancy carriage and asked Hua Mujin to get on. Hua Mujin just smirked. He remarked that the Taoist must have scammed quite a lot of people to afford that. Hua Mujin stared at the carriage with a raised eyebrow. He commented that it was a fine 4-horse carriage and that he was impressed. Hua Mujin clicked his tongue in anticipation. Then he stepped inside the fancy carriage, ready to enjoy the ride. He looked around the interior, taking it all in. The inside was even lavishly decorated, he thought. Hua Mujin ran his hand along the soft cotton and leather. He remarked that the carriage was lined with cotton and finished with leather. He then added that the Taoist really had a strong work ethic for a crook. Hua Mujin asked the Taoist why he didn't find honest work if he was so professional. The Taoist replied that he would make sure to do that from now on. Hua Mujin was clearly not buying it. Hua Mujin told the Taoist to wake him up when they arrived, deciding to get some sleep. The Taoist replied that he understood and told him to rest well, looking concerned. The Taoist thought to himself that Hua Mujinshin should just wait, looking furious. He then told the driver to depart, his eyes filled with malice. The carriage started moving, climbing up a steep mountain path. The road ahead looked long and winding, disappearing into the distance. The carriage continued its journey through the mountains. The horses trotted steadily, their hooves echoing through the quiet landscape. The carriage wheels turned, grinding against the rocky path as they climbed higher into the mountains. The horses kept pulling, unaware of the danger ahead. The carriage finally stopped. The Taoist stepped out and announced that they had arrived. The bearded man ordered his minion to drag Hua Mujin out of the carriage. He wanted to make an example of him. Again, the Taoist's face twisted with rage. He couldn't believe someone would try to mess with a Taoist who was trying to help people. He was clearly furious. A huge thug loomed over the sleeping Hua Mujin. This was the price he would pay for getting in the way. The thug's fist came down, a brutal strike aimed at Hua Mujin. He shouted not to resent them as his fist got closer. Hua Mujin's eyes snapped open, filled with shock. What the hell was happening? He realized that they had already arrived at their destination. But why was he about to get punched? The thug's fist connected with a sickening thud. The force of the punch sent Hua Mujin flying. The chief steward watched in disbelief as Hua Mujin was struck. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The Wudong White Immortal seemed impressed, his hands glowing with power. He admitted that Hua Mujin really wasn't all talk. Hua Mujin stared at the Wudong White Immortal suspiciously. He asked how Jinyang had become such an isolated forest. Was he the target from the start? He thought the man was just a scammer, but it looked like he could scheme too. The Wudong White Immortal smirked, a dangerous glint in his eyes. He said that he was getting bored anyway. The Wudong White Immortal's red eyes narrowed, a sinister smile spreading across his face. He challenged Hua Mujin to show him what he's got. The man bellowed, demanding everyone come out. He warned that the dandy was trying to shorten his own life. The thugs moved into action, grabbing their weapons. They were ready for a fight. Suddenly, a group of 4 fighters appeared, surrounded by a dark energy. They were Zhongshan's 4 demons. The attacker looked at Hua Mujin with disgust. He commented that his appearance was ugly as hell, and he could sense demonic energy. The attacker noticed the weapons of the 4 demons. He remarked that they were pretty varied. The attacker looked at Hua Mujin, a smirk playing on his lips. He told him to show him what he could do. The attacker didn't wait for an answer. He moved in a blur, his hands glowing with red energy. Hua Mujin grunted as the blow landed. The force of the strike sent him staggering back. Just as the attacker was about to strike again, the Zhonghayan 4 demons rushed in. They surrounded Hua Mujin, ready to defend him. One of the Zhonghayan 4 demons realized what was happening. He shouted that the attacker was only going after one person. He told his comrades they had to help Hua Mujin. The attacker was hit hard, and he could feel it. He yelled, saying that the blow was coming down like a mace, and that it was so heavy. Hua Mujin managed to block the attack, but the force behind it was immense. He grunted as he absorbed the blow. The clash between them was intense, each blow carrying tremendous power. Sparks flew as their weapons met, the force of impact shaking the ground. Hua Mujin stood over the attacker, looking down at him with cold eyes. He told him that he was nothing special after all. Hua Mujin didn't waste any time. He struck the attacker with a final, devastating blow, sending him flying. The attacker yelled, feeling the power behind his strike. He was sure he had the upper hand. Hua Mujin barely managed to block the attack, but the force behind it was huge. He could feel the impact shaking his arms. The sound of metal on metal echoed through the mountains as their weapons met once more. The attacker grunted, pushing harder. Hua Mujin was hit, the force of the blow taking his breath away. He felt a sharp pain shoot through his body. Hua Mujin didn't give him a chance to recover. He launched a counterattack, his sword moving with blinding speed. Hua Mujin barely managed to hold his ground, blocking the strike just in time. He grunted, feeling the force of the blow. The immortal didn't let up, pressing his attack with relentless speed. He was determined to break through Hua Mujin's defenses. Hua Mujin was hit, the sword tearing through his guard. He felt a sharp pain as the blade made contact. Hua Mujin fell to the ground, the force of the blow sending him sprawling. He groaned, trying to get back on his feet. Hua Mujin thought to himself that they were definitely using demonic arts. He wondered how there could be demonic arts here in the Central Plains, and he didn't want to kill juniors who used them. He wondered what to do. do. Hua Mujin looked down at the men he had defeated and paused. He was trying to decide what to do with them. One of the Zhonghaian 4 demons fell to his knees, begging for his life. "We lost. Please spare us," he pleaded. The same member of the Zhonghaian 4 demons continued to speak. Damn it, to think the Zhonghaian 4 demons would be defeated so helplessly. After the first few moves, it was obvious we're no match for you. Why'd then mess around and get hit, if you like getting hit? Hua Mujin looked down at the defeated men and said, "Fine, I'll spare you. I'll destroy your energy core and sever your meridians." The member of the Zhonghaian 4 demons cried out in pain as Hua Mujin's words hit him. One of the Zhonghaian 4 demons was on his knees, begging for mercy. He cried out, saying they were only following orders. Hua Mujin just stared down at the man, unimpressed. "Don't whine at that age of yours," Hua Mujin said coldly. Hua Mujin leaned in, demanding to know who taught him those martial arts. The Zhonghaian 4 demons member seemed confused. He stammered, asking what Hua Mujin meant by that. Hua Mujin pressed him harder. He wanted to know who his master was. Hua Mujin said it was ridiculous to call what he had demonic energy, but that was definitely it. He added that there weren't many who emitted demonic energy in the central plains. The member of the Zhonghaian 4 demons started to crack. He admitted that until the year before he was last alive, they didn't even know his master's name. He said that their master told them to forget about looking for other disciples under him. Hua Mujin scoffed. He said that they should have kept their heads down and practiced shabby martial arts quietly, but instead they went thieving. The member of the Zhonghaian 4 demons denied it immediately. He said they weren't thieves and only helped with their brother's business on the side. The Taoist looked up at Hua Mujin, trying to justify his actions. He asked if Hua Mujin knew what that man was like, and still helped him. He argued that saving people was a righteous deed, wasn't it? Hua Mujin cut him off, clearly not interested in excuses. He ordered them to leave and to stop being lackeys. He coldly warned that if he ever saw them again, they would die. The group quickly thanked him, relieved to be let off so easily. Hua Mujin continued, now demanding that the Taoist not only pay ransom for the men, but also pay with his own life. He added that he wanted reimbursement for his lost stamina and mental damage during the whole incident. The Taoist stammered, asking if there was even such a thing as mental damage. Hua Mujin watched as the carriage slowly made its way down the mountain path. He didn't say a word, just stared as it disappeared into the distance. One of the thugs remembered his master's words. He had said that they weren't good at thinking and had gullible ears. Their master had warned them that they needed to carefully choose who they befriended. One of the thugs brought up something their master had said. He had told them that if they ever met someone strong and righteous, they should follow them and serve them. The other thugs nodded in agreement. Their thoughts were aligned. Hua Mujin was getting annoyed. He asked why they were stopping again and what it was this time. The thugs bowed down to Hua Mujin. They shouted that he was their boss. The thugs pledged their loyalty, promising to serve until their death in the Hua clan and begging him to take them in. Hua Mujin looked at them, confused. He asked if they had gone crazy from getting beat up so much and why they were calling him boss. The thugs kept going, saying they weren't even that good yet. They begged Hua Mujin to take care of them as their boss. Hua Mujin was so shocked that he could only ask what was going on. The horse-drawn carriage continued its journey through the night. The steady rhythm of the hooves was the only sound for miles. Back in the carriage, Hua Mujin lay staring at the roof. Something was bothering him, and he couldn't shake it off. Hua Mujin was surrounded by his new followers, all of them waiting for his orders. He knew he had to make this work, for their sake and his own. Cheol Muk couldn't believe it. He asked Hua Mujin if he was really only 23 years old, wondering if everyone had suffered some kind of energy problem. Hua Mujin asked what was so unbelievable, but Cheol Muk just told him to forget it. Meanwhile, an old man watched from the shadows, his face unreadable. He seemed to be waiting for something to happen. Hua Mujin lay there, thinking about the whole situation. He couldn't understand how demonic arts users could become warriors of ruined households of the Orthodox sect, wondering if it even made sense. Cheol Muk spoke up, saying his master always told him that being a demonic arts user was a way of living, an identity. It wasn't just a faction or affiliation. Dong Jiak chimed in, saying that realistically speaking, no Orthodox family would accept demonic arts users. He added that they would just get dragged into scandals and they would smash the teeth of anyone who dared to say a thing. Hua Mujin smiled slightly, saying they reminded him of someone. He paused, then warned them that if they wanted to serve under another household, Hua Mujin's voice was stern, as he declared that they must be willing to stake their lives on any order he gave, whether they liked it or not. He finished by saying their personal freedom meant nothing, and they must obey like a dog for the honor of the household. The thugs looked up, practically begging for orders. They shouted that they understood, promising to devote themselves wholeheartedly to their new boss. Hua Mujin raised his hand slightly, looking a little annoyed by their eagerness. He sighed, telling them to do as they wanted, declaring that they were now warriors of the Flame Hua clan. The thug thanked Hua Mujin, then quickly corrected himself, saying he should be called Young Master. He asked if that was understood, and the others immediately responded, confirming that they understood Young Master. Hours later, the moon hung high in the sky, casting a pale light across the land. The clouds drifted slowly, as if watching over everything that happened below. The wagon slowly approached the imposing gate, the sound of its wheels echoing in the night. They were arriving at their destination, ready to face whatever awaited them. Hua Mujin stared up at the massive estate, the gates looming above them. One of the thugs looked up at the building and asked if it was his house, clearly impressed by its size. Hua Mujin stuttered, telling them to come inside, then ordered the guys to open the gate. He looked nervous as he spoke, but still tried to sound like he was in charge. One of the men looked confused and asked Hua Mujin what was going on. Hua Mujin didn't answer his question, instead telling him to prepare food in the annex building and to do it quickly. Hua Mujin changed his mind, telling the guy to forget about the food. He said that they needed to check his treasure room first, then pointed the way, acting like he was in control. They all entered the building, and one of the thugs looked around, clearly impressed. He commented on how well Hua Mujin had been living on the money he had swindled, sounding a little jealous. Sojin asked what was the matter, wondering if something troubling had happened to Hua Mujin. Hua Mujin told Brother B that it was nothing and ordered him to go back inside. But Sojin wasn't convinced, pressing him to tell him what was going on, asking if it had something to do with the new guests. One of the thugs told Sojin to leave, asking why he was sticking his nose where it didn't belong. He sighed, saying that judging from his clothes, Sojin must be one of the swindler's guests, and guests shouldn't meddle in household affairs. Hua Mujin's eye narrowed, his gaze hardening as the tension in the air thickened. Sojin was told that he had quite the foul mouth, and one of the thugs asked Hua Mujin if he should deal with him. Hua Mujin quickly said no, telling them it was a misunderstanding and that they were his guests. The thug grinned, ready to introduce the new arrivals. He announced that he was presenting Zhongshan's 4 demons and the Flame Hua clan's first young master with a flourish. The young master scoffed, saying that he wasn't surprised Hua Mujin's tongue was so sharp. He called him the insane eldest son of the Flame Hua clan and accused him of running around with lowlifes and terrorizing commoners. The young master added that Hua Mujin's grandfather must be weeping in his grave. Zhongshan's 4 demons didn't waste any time. They moved forward, ready to attack, calling Hua Mujin's group pathetic trash. Bigojin stepped in front of Hua Mujin, drawing his sword. He stammered nervously, telling Brother do not to worry. Bigojin declared that he wasn't the kind of scabby swordsman to lose to such scum. The thug's eyes widened in disbelief at Bigojin's sudden confidence. He could only stammer, asking if he was serious. The grip tightened on the staff. He'd had enough of whatever was going on. The man with the staff looked absolutely furious. He asked for permission to crush that scumbag's jaw. Bigojin pleaded with the young master, begging him to allow him to handle it. He insisted that he would take care of it himself. Bigojin stood his ground, facing the attacker. The air crackled with tension. The young master smirked. He said that the dog does know how to protect its owner, and told the mutt to come at him. Hua Mujin narrowed his eyes, locking onto the target. His sword flashed out, a streak of pure energy aimed right at the attacker. The swords crashed together with a deafening clang. The attacker laughed, confident in his strike. The attacker smirked, observing Hua Mujin's technique. He declared that Hua Mujin's swift style was useless because he lacked strength. Hua Mujin looked absolutely shocked by the statement. The swords met again, the force of the impact reverberating through the air. Hua Mujin felt a surge of panic as he realized the attacker might be right. With a sickening crack, Hua Mujin's sword shattered. He stared down at the broken pieces, unable to believe what had just happened. The onlookers watched the fight above them with intense anticipation. They were sure that it was over, that there was no way Hua Mujin could make a comeback from here. One of the fighters examined the swords, realizing that his own weapon was weaker. He figured that it would break soon, either his sword or his skull. Suddenly, something unexpected happened, and he was caught completely off guard. The swords crashed together, the force of the impact sending shockwaves through the air. Each strike was faster and more powerful than the last. The sword moved with incredible speed, cutting through the air like a hot knife through butter. It was a strike that could decide the entire fight. Hua Mujin's eyes burned with determination, his focus absolute. He was ready to give it everything he had, no matter the cost. The air crackled with raw power, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. The energy was building up to some kind of massive attack. Hua Mujin was calm and collected, as if he knew exactly what was going to happen next. He asked one of the thugs to throw him his iron club. The thug, surprised, replied, "Yes, young master." Hua Mujin's face twisted with rage as he heard the insult. He asked in disbelief, "What did you say? My grandfather is crying in his grave?" He was clearly not going to let that slide. Hua Mujin's eyes glowed red with fury as he made his threat. He warned that he was going to make sure the guy couldn't keep burrowing from the grave right beside his grandfather. But then he paused, as if realizing something. The thugs could only stare in disbelief, completely caught off guard. They were making weird noises, clearly shocked by the turn of events. Hua Mujin's eyes glowed with fury as he threatened to break the guy's bones. He didn't care if the man was going to share a coffin with his grandfather. He was going to make him pay. Laughter echoed from somewhere far above, overlooking the village. The unknown person was clearly enjoying the show, commenting that Hua Mujin certainly knew how to beat someone properly. One of the Zhongshan 4 demons casually remarked that the guy was about to die any second now. The others just nodded, like it was no big deal. The man with the yellow hat suddenly begged the young master to spare the guy's life. He was even offering to pay for it, clearly desperate to save him. The man with the yellow hat continued to beg, explaining that the guy had ties to the unorthodox martial heavens. He insisted that he couldn't let someone like that die in his household, offering to pay whatever it took. He was really pleading. The young master listened, then said that he had been thinking the man would put his foolish hope in that fool. He added that he should have said so earlier, like it mattered. Someone reached for the door, their hand outstretched. The air was thick with anticipation. The young master looked around at the men and the gold. He observed that it looked like they had raked in quite a lot already. The young master's face was cold as he smiled. He announced that it was time to start calculating, beginning with the worth of the 4 men behind the guy in gold ingots. The young master continued, adding that he had been thinking the man would throw them into the flames, or why would he? He also calculated the compensation for the guy's limbs at 300 gold ingots, the chef's worth at 500, and that loudmouth brother of his at even more. The young master finished by adding the psychological damage he suffered and the physical strength he wasted, totaling 1,000 gold ingots. The young master smiled coldly. To keep the math simple, he told the guy to hand over everything he had. He asked if there were any objections. The guy, sweating and pale, could only stammer that there weren't. He thought to himself that this scumbag was worse than any group of bandits. 2 men started carrying chests full of gold. They struggled under the weight, but they didn't dare complain. The room was silent except for the clinking of the coins. The man with long hair ordered his men to leave nothing behind. The men acknowledged his order immediately. Hua Mujin looked up, lost in thought. He seemed to be calculating something in his head. The folding screen stood in the room, silent and imposing, but something felt off about it. Hua Mujin stared intently at the folding screen. He wondered what it was. There was a strange energy coming from it, something he couldn't quite explain. Hua Mujin wondered if it was just his imagination. The other man asked if he liked the folding screen. Hua Mujin said he didn't particularly care for it, and the man replied that he had a sharp eye. He added that the folding screen was the work of Master Zhang Sogen. The young master told the other man that he was worried about the room being too empty. He offered the folding screen as a gift, suggesting he could take it with him if he wished. He then called the man a greedy brat. The carriage was loaded with gold, ready to be hauled away. It was a king's ransom. Hua Mujin told the man that he wouldn't be needing his carriage anymore, so he was taking it. The man replied that it would be an honor if he did. Hua Mujin then ordered everyone to move out. The carriage wheels turned, kicking up dust as they rolled away. The sound of the wheels echoed through the streets. Hua Mujin called out a farewell. He told them to live a righteous life, and that he'd see them next time. The men on the ground could only watch as he left. As the carriage rolled away, the man shouted after them. He was furious that he had been robbed of everything. He couldn't believe the young master had done this to him. The man looked up to the sky, tears streaming down his face. He cried out, wondering what he had done to deserve this. He couldn't believe he had encountered such a lunatic. Meanwhile, back at the Flame Hua clan compound, the building stood silent. The place was a shadow of its former glory, waiting for someone to restore it. Suddenly, the man's eyes widened. He looked completely shocked, like he had just realized something important. He stammered, trying to understand what was happening. Men were carrying boxes full of gold. The others watched, trying to figure out what was was going on. They were all completely confused. The subordinate was shocked and asked where the young master got all that money. He nervously wondered if he had killed someone for it. The young master denied it and told him to keep the money safe. Anyway, MASOK asked the subordinate how old those people over there looked to him. The subordinate examined them and said that they looked far from ordinary with their strong builds. MASOK said that they all looked to be over 40, no matter how he looked at them. He asked where Chief Do and Elder Joe were. The subordinate said he'd tell them that, and they'd like it. The subordinate explained that very important guests had arrived, so Chief Do and Elder Joe were entertaining them in the reception hall. He added that they told him to bring the young master there as soon as he got back. The young master was suspicious and wondered if another scammer had come to cheat them. The subordinate quickly denied it and begged him not to hit these people. He urged the young master to hurry and wondered what those old men had done this time. The young master had arrived. He walked through the doorway, ready to face whatever awaited him. Two men greeted the young master with enthusiasm. They seemed genuinely happy to see him. The man introduced the three merchant group leaders to the young master. He explained that they had generously supported the clan during difficult times. Pung Kwan O, the leader of the Pungyang merchant group, stepped forward. He said he'd heard rumors of the hidden dragon awakening and now saw that they were true. Dong Guanyo, leader of the Muryang Merchant Union, introduced himself next, relieved to see the young master looking healthy after his hardships. Huang Yuchong, the current manor master, followed, saying it had been too long since he last paid his respects. Hua Mujin clasped his hands together, a faint smile playing on his lips. The three merchant leaders shifted slightly, exchanging glances with each other. The air in the room was thick with unspoken tension. The men sat down around the table, each with a small cup of tea in front of them. They smiled, but their eyes held a calculating glint. Hua Mujin paused, holding the teacup close to his lips. So, what was he going to say? Hua Mujin looked directly at the three men, his expression unreadable. One of the men quickly apologized, saying that they hadn't come to pressure him for repayment. He added that they simply wished to congratulate him on his awakening and hoped they hadn't caused any discomfort. Hua Mujin thanked them for their devoted support. He explained that repayment should be handled properly, but he had only recently regained his senses and wasn't fully aware of the clan's current state. Hua Mujin then said he wanted to know the total debt the Flame Hua clan owed their groups. One of the men stuttered, but agreed that they needed to know the exact amount before they could discuss a repayment schedule. He added that, although he wasn't glad about it, they would disclose the approximate amounts. The men began to list the debts: 5,300 nyang for the Pungyang Merchant Group, 3,200 nyang for the Golden Finance Manor, and 1,900 nyang for the Muryang Merchant Union. Hua Mujin listened intently as the total debt came to light: 10,400 nyang. The weight of that number settled heavily in the room. One of the men spoke up, admitting that he had something to confess. He explained that they had been under a lot of pressure from the Changhua Merchant Group, and the air in the room grew heavy. The man explained that the Changhua Merchant Group wanted the rights to the Flame Hua clan's debt. He added that they knew it would harm the clan, so they had been strongly rejecting them. The man continued, explaining that after the duel, the Changhua Merchant Group began using their massive financial power to pressure them. They monopolized all their trading goods and cut off all the merchant groups associated with them. The man's voice trembled as he revealed that the Changhua Merchant Group had even stolen away their branch managers. He said that they were shameless, and he couldn't believe such things were happening. The man admitted, with a tone of shame, that they no longer had the strength to endure. Before they surrendered the rights to the debt, they felt they at least had to warn Hua Mujin. Hua Mujin looked at them, his expression full of sincerity. He expressed how grateful he was for their generosity, adding that thinking of everything they had endured weighed heavily on his heart. Hua Mujin continued, his voice filled with emotion. He pointed out that all those who had clung to their clan when times were good had left, but Elder Joe, Chief Do, and these three men remained to protect the clan. Hua Mujin clasped his hands together, his eyes gleaming with determination. He stated that although he may not be well versed in scholarly matters, there was one thing he understood well: debts of gratitude must be repaid properly. Hua Mujin stood tall, a confident smirk playing on his lips. He declared that he would repay everything the Flame Hua clan owed them right away, his voice ringing with conviction. Elder Joe and Chief Do exchanged surprised glances, their eyes wide with disbelief. One of them stammered, questioning if that was truly possible, a glimmer of hope flickering in his eyes. Amujin's eyes narrowed as he spoke with conviction. He declared that, in return for their help, he would free their groups from the Changhua merchant group's control. His words hung heavy in the air. A hush fell over the room as everyone listened. They were clearly surprised by his bold statement, waiting to see what would happen next. Chief Do leaned forward, his expression hopeful. He asked young Master Mujin if this meant he was willing to use force on their behalf. The question was heavy with expectation. Hua Mujin responded immediately with confidence, but another man interrupted in panic, questioning if young Master Mujin even knew who was backing those scumbags. The man's concern was obvious. The man with glasses looked up in alarm. He revealed that it was the Kongdong sect, one of the strongest sects in the entire Murim, backing them. The news clearly made everyone uneasy. Someone asked if those old coots were backing the Changhua merchant group. Addressing young Master Mujin, Hua Mujin told Chief Do not to worry about it. Chief Do spoke with gratitude, saying that just getting rid of the dead would be an enormous blessing for them. He added that there was no way they'd let the Flame Hua clan clash with the Kongdong sect. Chief Do spoke with admiration, saying that a sleeping dragon had truly awakened. He thanked Hua Mujin for his words, saying that his heart was now at ease. The group got up to leave, wishing prosperity upon the clan. They bid everyone safe travels as they headed out. Hua Mujin's expression turned serious. He told Chief Do to gather information on those rats from the Changhua merchant group, including their finances, operating regions, trade goods, and even their ties with the Kongdong sect. Chief Do looked surprised by the sudden order. Someone asked, stuttering, if young Master Mujin was serious about what he'd just said. Hua Mujin shot back, annoyed at the repeated nagging. Hua Mujin went on, his face hardening, and warned that they'd try to seize their throats next time if they let those scumbags get away with it. He declared that at this point, it was all or nothing anyway. Hua Mujin reasoned that if over a dozen years of support only resulted in their current situation, then they wouldn't need them anymore. He said that they should properly repay them at least once, even if they dismissed it as the mad bravado of a lunatic. Hua Mujin said that they'd see how it goes. One of his men reported that the tasks he'd ordered them to do had all been completed. Hua Mujin nodded, satisfied, and told them to gather around. Hua Mujin told everyone to give their greetings, introducing the two new faces as the clan's elder and the chief steward. Someone looked confused and asked young Master Mujin who they were. Hua Mujin announced that he'd introduced the new members. He declared that starting today, these warriors would be joining their clan. He proudly proclaimed that they were the famous young men of Zhongshan. The Zhongshan's 4 demons stepped forward as a group. They asked everyone to look after them. Hua Mujin grinned, clearly enjoying the moment. He told them not to be shocked yet, because he had something even more surprising to reveal. Hua Mujin revealed that all of them were younger than him. Someone in the group stammered in disbelief. One of the Zhongshan's 4 demons complained that he was starving and asked if they should go tear into some meat. He wondered why everyone was looking so stunned, assuming they were just overwhelmed by their presence. One of the clan members challenged young Master Mujin, asking if he was aware of the Zhongnan's 4 demons' fearsome reputation. He demanded to know why young Master Mujin would bring them into the clan without asking anyone. Young Master Mujin countered, asking if the clan member had consulted him before trying to sneak his younger siblings out. Young Master Mujin declared that if he approved, they would stay, but if not, they were out. He reminded the clan member that he was the one who would become the next clan patriarch. Young Master Mujin casually told Ma Sok to go buy a cow. A clan member stammered that they didn't have any money, pointing out that over 1,000 gold had just been used to repay their debts. The clan member looked completely shocked by the request. The clan member exclaimed in shock about all the money. Another clan member asked young Master Mujin if he had done something. The clan member looked completely shocked. He stared at the folding screen and stammered, wondering what it was. Young Master Mujin explained that someone said it was one of Jang So-san's pieces and gave it to him. The clan member exclaimed in disbelief, "Jang So-san?" Young Master Mujin continued, explaining that apparently even if they sold it for cheap, it would at least get them 90 gold, so he took it. The clan member looked at the screen, impressed. "Oh, it looks genuine." The clan member asked if that should be enough to buy meat. Young Master Mujin stammered, saying it was more than enough. The clan member replied, "Then stop talking and go buy it." Hua Mujin watched the clan member leave. He stared off into the distance, lost in thought. The folding screen stood silently in the room. It seemed to radiate a strange energy. The next morning, the sun rose over the mountains. The air was crisp and cool, promising a new day. Hua Mujin stood before his clan, ready to begin. He asked if they wondered why he had called them at dawn. Hua Mujin explained that after everything that had happened lately, he realized they all needed special training. He emphasized that the foundation of swordsmanship was the body that wielded it, and no matter how great the martial arts, it was useless if the body was weak. Hua Mujin declared that starting that day, they would begin special physical training. He looked determined, ready to whip them into shape. Hua Mujin added that he would personally oversee it. He stared intensely, making sure they understood the seriousness of his words. Young Master Mujin looked at his clan members, a serious expression on his face. He warned them that he hoped there would be no dropouts as they followed him. He pointed to the sacks of rice at their feet, each weighing 144 kilograms. Young Master Mujin declared that from that day on, the sacks would be their loyal training partners, emphasizing that it was not food, and anyone caught eating it would be dead. Little brother and little sister looked at their sack of rice, comparing it to the others. Little brother pointed out that theirs looked much smaller, maybe 15 kilograms at most. One of the clan members looked confused, stammering as he asked what exactly they were supposed to do with the rice sack. Young Master Mujin told them to hoist it onto their shoulders. One of the men looked at young Master Mujin with disbelief. He protested, saying that the rice sack would need 2 men to lift together, clearly doubting the task. Young Master Mujin glared at the men, his eyes burning with fury. He told them to shut up and pick up the sacks, or they'd regret it. He drew his sword slightly, letting them see the dull edge. Young Master Mujin explained that it might not be sharp, but one hit would crush every bone in their bodies. He told them to lift it up or spar with him. Young Master Mujin turned his attention to the 4 demons, looking absolutely furious. He asked if they were playing around, saying that practitioners of demonic arts shouldn't be so embarrassing, and told them to lift 3 sacks each. He repeated the offer, telling them that if they didn't want to lift the sacks, they could spar with him instead. The man groaned, his body screaming in protest under the weight. He was pushing himself to the limit, every muscle burning with effort. Young Master Mujin watched the trainee struggle and shouted encouragement. He told them that if they decided to lift it, they could. The trainee strained under the weight, his vision blurring. He pushed back the pathetic thought that he couldn't do it, knowing that only death awaited if he aimed for what was impossible. He told them to start sitting and standing, 200 repetitions. The group started the sitting and standing exercise, grunting with each repetition. The trainee groaned under the crushing weight of the rice sack. Every muscle screamed in protest, threatening to give out. With a burst of effort, the trainee strained to push himself up, his face contorted in pain. He was determined not to give in, no matter how much his body protested. Young Master Mujin continued to push them, demanding they tighten their stomachs and push harder. He yelled at them, asking if they wanted to die. The trainee's face was a mask of pain and confusion. He wondered what this feeling was that was washing over him. He felt like his entire body was collapsing from the legs upward. The trainee knew he couldn't give in, not if he wanted to avoid young Master Mujin's wrath. The trainee wondered what kind of training this was. Even watching it was exhausting. Young Master Mujin was pushing them to their limits, and it seemed impossible to keep up. He said people like that didn't deserve to live, and anyone who complained was gonna die. He commanded them to keep pushing. The trainee groaned in pain. The trainee strained, barely able to speak. He managed to mutter that he had done 200. Young Master Mujin scoffed, saying the whole day was gone just from the warm-up. He asked if they wanted to practice martial arts with such pathetic stamina. He announced that today's training ended there, but then he trailed off, hinting there was more to come. Young Master Mujin announced that, from now on, they would become one with the rice sacks. The trainees looked up at him, confused. What kind of training was this, anyway? Young Master Mujin continued, telling them to eat with the rice sacks, train with them, even sleep with them. He commanded them to carry them at all times. Until when, they wondered. Until he told them to put them down. He told him to tie all of them, along with their rice sacks, using rope. Jang Sogen stared at the ground, a strange feeling washing over him. For some reason, he wished he could see his mother's face. He missed her. Told him to make sure everyone gets ready for every meal. Hua Mujin was completely worn out. He could barely stand, his body screaming in protest. After the brutal training, he collapsed onto the floor, unable to take another step. His body was pushed to its absolute limit. Hours later, under the light of the moon, the camp was quiet. The trainees ate their meals, still burdened by their rice sacks. The weight never left them, not even for a moment. They struggled to eat, the rice sacks making every movement awkward and difficult. The training was pure torture. The demon paused with his chopsticks, a strange feeling washing over him. Something was definitely up. One of the demons asked the boss if something was strange. strange. He pointed out that their hands were shaking, even though they only trained their legs. The boss confirmed he was wondering about the same thing. One of the demons agreed, saying that this had never happened before, even when they trained with their previous master. Another confirmed that he felt the same way. The next day, the training, continued without pause. The numbers echoed across the training ground. 42, 43. Young Master Mujin suddenly stopped counting and glared at someone in the third row. He screamed, asking the brat if he wanted to die. One of the clan members watching couldn't help but wonder what kind of monsters they were all turning into. Young Master Mujin yelled that they were all becoming ducks, ordering them to follow him and quack. The clan members quacked along. Someone muttered in disbelief, wondering what the hell this was all about. And the next day, the brutal training continued. The clan members strained under the weight of the rice sack, letting out a grunt of effort. Young Master Mujin yelled at them to push faster, asking if they wanted to train all day again. Anyone slower than him would get another sack. The clan member strained, barely able to lift his head. He muttered that he'd reached 50, trying to push through the pain. Another clan member marched with his rice sack. Young Master Mujin watched the kids, surprised that they were keeping up. He wondered if he should make it even harder. One of the trainees was clearly struggling, his face contorted in effort. The water rushed with incredible force, slamming against the rocks. It was a dangerous river. One of the trainees stared at the rushing water in shock, recognizing the place. Young Master Mujin looked at them with a strange glint in his eye. He confirmed their suspicion, then asked if they were all hot. The river was wide and dangerous, the current strong enough to sweep them away. Young Master Mujin commanded them to cross. The trainees prepared to cross, a mix of fear and determination on their faces. The man stared at the river, the weight of the rice sack digging into his shoulders. The river crossing was not going to be easy. The waterfall crashed down with incredible force, sending spray high into the air. The power of the water was terrifying. One of the group exclaimed at the waterfall, joking that it must be refreshing. Another person suddenly realized Soyeon couldn't swim. Someone else was surprised at how much Soyeon's way of talking had changed after all the training, and wondered if they should tell Mujin about it. One of the men shouted in shock at young Master Mujin, saying it was impossible to cross the river because the current was too fast. He added that people were known to die there, even without carrying anything. Young Master Mujin scoffed, telling the old men not to worry so much, and that everything was tested before they proceeded. One of the men questioned when he had ever tested this kind of training. Young Master Mujin challenged them all. They could either cross the river or fight him. Young Master Mujin declared he was going ahead and jumped into the raging river without a second thought. The current looked incredibly dangerous. One of the men asked Cheolmuk what they should do. He realized that their chances were better with young Master Mujin and yelled that he was going too. Another man decided to jump as well, screaming as he leaped into the raging water. The river looked incredibly dangerous. One of the men cursed and yelled that they had no choice but to run. It was do or die, he said. One of the remaining men cursed, looking scared. He told the other to move aside if he wasn't going to jump. One man yelled, asking if young Master Mujin would actually kill them. He declared he was going first. Another man screamed, telling him to wait. The man insisted he would never say something like that to Mujin. He was a warrior of the Flame Hua clan, he said, trying to reassure himself. Another man jumped into the river, yelling that this wouldn't make him back down. He was determined to get through this. The two men watched as the others jumped into the river. One of them yelled young Master Dojin's name, surprised. The man in the water yelled that if they fell, they would really die. He told them to move their arms and legs non-stop to stay afloat. The man fought against the rushing water, his mouth wide open as he gasped for air. He was struggling to keep his head above the surface, the river threatening to swallow him whole. He gritted his teeth, pushing forward with all his might. I can do it, he told himself. Even I can do something like this. His eye narrowed with determination. Even I can, he thought. The weight of the rice sack threatened to drag him down, but he refused to let it. He strained against the current, his muscles burning with effort. His body started to sink further down into the river. Even I can do it, he screamed, trying to ignite one last spark of strength. The man thrashed wildly, fighting the unforgiving current. He screamed, his voice barely audible over the roar of the water. Without hesitation, a figure dove headfirst into the raging river. He shouted something, determined to reach the struggling man. He reached out and grabbed young Master Hwadun. He yelled, fighting to keep them both afloat. He pulled young Master Hwadun closer, shouting over the water. He commanded. He braced himself, ready to take on the river head on. But then, his eyes widened in horror. The river raged like a monster, threatening to swallow anyone who dared enter. From the shore, a voice commanded action, demanding they jump in now. Panic filled the air as the men on the bank spotted young Master Hua Dojin struggling in the water. They shouted, pointing towards him, hoping someone would reach him in time. The savior praised young Master Hua Dojin's effort, while Dojin gasped his thanks for being saved. The man brushed off the thanks and immediately checked on the kid. He asked if he was okay. Worry etched on his face. The little brother assured him that he wasn't hurt, relieved to be safe. He explained that a warrior from the clan had fortunately come to his rescue. The man carrying the rice sack was shocked to see young Master Hua Dojin had caught up. He warned him not to overexert himself. He said that being together was a good thing, but it would be meaningless if something happened to him. Young Master Hua Dojin's eyes burned with determination. He declared that they couldn't stay kids forever. He vowed to stay with them until the very end. Young Master Hua Dojin's voice shook with emotion. He added that he wanted to become a real martial warrior of the Manhwa clan. He wanted to be strong. From the rocks, a man called out to young Master Hua Dojin. He thanked him for his efforts. He said it was splendid. The mountains loomed in the distance, shrouded in mist. The path ahead would be long and hard, but they were determined to face it together. His fingers strained as he desperately searched for a hold. The rocks were slick with moisture, making each grip a gamble. The warrior clung to the cliff face, the weight of the rice sack threatening to pull him down. The drop below looked like certain death. He warned them that if they fell, they wouldn't even be able to gather their bones. He urged them to climb with everything they had. One of the warriors cursed under his breath, calling the young master a madman and lunatic. He regretted following him. Then his expression changed to shock. The warrior screamed as he fell. The warrior screamed, wondering what was happening. His grip was failing, and the weight of the rice sack was too much to handle. Another warrior begged to be spared. He cursed, realizing he was done for. The command echoed through the mountains, telling them not to doze off. They were ordered to grab the rock in front of them, the speaker calling them idiots. High above, the sky was clear and blue. The sun shone brightly, a stark contrast to the struggle below. The warriors were ordered to run. The speaker warned that if someone fell behind, he would have to run too. The little brother asked his mother if those people were death row prisoners. He answered his own question, confirming they were warriors from the Manhwa clan, and even more so. The girl struggled against the current, her face showing her fear. Someone gasped, calling out Soyeon's name in alarm. Below, the others were still fighting against the current, barely managing to stay afloat. The man struggled to run while carrying the heavy rice sack, calling out to Lady Hua Soyeon. Someone responded with a questioning sound. Someone asked Lady Hua Soyeon if she was all right. Lady Hua Soyeon pleaded to be carried for a bit, urgently calling for Elder Joe. The men continued to carry the heavy sacks, struggling to keep their balance. The little sister rode on one man's shoulders, when suddenly, the men seemed surprised by something. The men carrying the rice sacks looked up, clearly confused. One of them demanded to know what was going on. Young Master Hua smirked, his eyes glinting dangerously. He warned that if anyone intended to collapse because of a little girl, he wouldn't stop them, but they would have to pay with their lives. The men continued to struggle with the rice sacks, their faces strained with effort. One of them yelled, demanding to know why they weren't running. The men collapsed onto the floor, unable to carry the rice sacks any further. They were completely exhausted. Young Master Hua looked down at someone. He called out to them. Young Master Hua continued, his voice laced with annoyance. He pointed out that the trainee was always falling behind and couldn't even meet the minimum requirements. He demanded to know how long this would continue. Young Master Hua's face grew even more stern. He questioned how long he had to suffer because of this person. He told them to quit if they couldn't handle it, warning them not to cause trouble for the others. He asked if they were even listening. The trainee's eyes narrowed, a dangerous glint appearing in them. He said he would kill them. Someone interrupted him, and he reacted with surprise. The trainee looked up, his voice filled with a mix of anger and despair. He confessed that he didn't want to be doing this, and that he had wanted to quit being a warrior a long time ago. The young master continued to berate the trainee, pointing out how he was collapsing like a rotten corpse. He wondered if the trainee was afraid he'd be beaten to death if he spoke up. It was a brutal assessment. Young Master Hua declared that the trainee wasn't fit to be a warrior. He announced that he would cleanly sever the trainee's lifeline. The trainee looked up, completely shocked by the sudden declaration. Someone interrupted the young master, telling him to stop. He pointed out that not everyone could be like him. The young master's fist clenched, clearly annoyed by the interruption. Young Master Hua yelled back, saying that the trainee shouldn't even try to live as a warrior in the first place. His face was red with anger. Young Master Hua told the trainee to stand up, threatening to kill him first. Someone else yelled for him to stop, but the young master looked absolutely furious. The man argued that even though the others came from the Manhwa clan, they were still brothers. He demanded to know how they could call themselves brothers After all the suffering, he was furious, wondering how much longer they would keep up such foolishness. The man on the ground struggled under the weight of the rice sack. Someone demanded to know if he really thought he could become strong like this. They were clearly disappointed, saying that this wasn't what they wanted. Another man stepped in, explaining that young Master Hua had been training with the Blade Force for years longer than them. He admitted that acceptance differed from person to person, but he insisted that it wasn't meaningless. He told the others to speak only after they surpassed young Master Hua. Another man, looking off to the side, declared that if he was ever in danger again, they would die by his hand before young Master Hua's. His tone was a clear threat. High above, the sun shone brightly through the clouds. It was a peaceful sight, a stark contrast to the tension below. Someone grunted, their muscles screaming in protest. The weight of the rice sack felt unbearable, like it was crushing them. The person trudged forward, each step a struggle. They cursed how far away the toilet was, their need growing more urgent with every step. The person stopped, wondering who could possibly be out at this hour. But then, they saw who it was, and their eyes widened in disbelief. The foot slammed into the ground with incredible force, cracking the stone beneath. Dust and debris flew into the air from the impact. The subordinate stared in disbelief, his jaw dropping. He couldn't believe what he was seeing, exclaiming,